nation.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to the show. Alex Phillips here with you through till 1 o'clock, sitting in for the inimitable Julia Hartley-Brewer, who was sticking on our little Talk Presenters WhatsApp group just yesterday pictures of her in the Alps on the beautiful powdered slopes, gleaming mountains behind her, trying to make us all jealous. And I say this to Julia, I'd actually rather have my eyes poked out than go skiing. So good on you. Go and enjoy it and have an après ski for me. But anyway, let's talk about the news of the day. Well, it's kind of the same stories again, constantly developing, constantly evolving. And if you were just listening to that handover there with Mike Graham, I mean, wow, I wake up every morning thinking, where are we going now with the Ukraine-Russia situation? Certainly, there's a whole different tone that's been placed over the argument and the analysis. And I make this one observation. It's funny, isn't it, how people's tunes change and what is the popular consensus of what to say and how to explain things and what is acceptable and what isn't just seems to change and evolve. And politicians like legacy media and the sort of normal commentariat all just then convene around the same opinion, their comfortable opinion they're all going to share and parrot. But if you look back chronologically at the evolution of what the consensus popular opinion was over time, you will notice it moves around a little bit. And at least what has happened now is Trump's come along and taken, well, completely a different viewpoint of that of many European leaders, and perhaps made people stop and question whether the cosy consensus popular viewpoint was indeed entirely accurate. Let's now talk to Philip Ingram, former senior military intelligence officer. So what I'm trying to allude to here is when Putin went and invaded Ukraine, and I'm not going to buy into the whole idea of, actually this is Ukraine's fault. We can talk about, geopolitical dynamics and what upsets Russia. And they were clearly upset, and Russia's intentions and whether Ukraine was some sort of, marvelous democracy, which never put a foot wrong with zero corruption, and whether it's always a unified country. I mean, look, we can discuss all those things, but I think they're immaterial. What matters now is people's reactions to it.
Yep.
And at the outbreak of this, apart from the UK, who just stood alone in saying, right, Putin, problem, let's get in there, everyone else, the other side of the channel, was saying, first of all, we need to build Putin a golden bridge. I'd never heard the phrase golden bridge. It's stuck in my mind from the start of that invasion, which essentially means sitting down and talking with him and appeasing him, which is what they're now saying. Then they said, well, we shouldn't put too many sanctions on. We're not going to send our weapons. Well, it's a bit politically sensitive. Economically, we need Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2. The prevarication and the disharmony coming out of Europe in those critical early hours, now they're suddenly going, oh, this is terrible. You can't speak to Putin. You can't appease him. Trump's a monster. Zelensky is amazing. We've done all this hard work. We don't actually now want to send troops in. This is crazy. Starmer's being crazy again. I mean, you could kind of think it's like a washing machine of the same recycled nonsense. But that doesn't actually therefore prove by default that Trump sitting with Putin and saying what he's saying now is the right approach.
Yep.
I just want to know your sort of overall analysis of this.
Up until the talks in Saudi Arabia, and even the talks in Saudi Arabia led by Marcus Rubio, the US Secretary of State, and as they sat down with the Russians, I thought the Americans were playing a very sound game. And part of that sound game was forcing Europe to step up and recognise it needs to take responsibility for its own security, and the couldn't guarantee the US because the US had other priorities elsewhere. The reason why I think the talks in Saudi Arabia were logical is Zelensky had presented a peace plan to Donald Trump before his inauguration and has been back in Washington again presenting refinements to the peace plan. He's presented his peace plan to all the European leaders and many other leaders around the world. So we knew where Zelensky was from a starting point. Nobody knew where the Russians were. And there's no point in having roundtable discussions where you get all the players in the room if you don't know what the start point is for everyone that's in there. So the Americans had to sit down with the Russians to get that start point. Now, I fully expected Marcus Rubio to go in and poke Lavrov in the chest and say, right, there's your start point, you are going to accept it. It seems as if Lavrov, who is the hugely more experienced diplomat, has turned around and poked the Americans in the chest and said, here's our point and you're going to start putting that out. And there's something going on in the background that we are not aware of that defies the logic and this illogical approach that's coming out from Trump. One of the issues is the European issue. The other issue, I think, is trying to split this growing relationship between Russia and China, because China is Trump's biggest threat area.
Without a doubt. I've heard people say that, and I think that's actually important. And of course, the US is very focused on trying to start breaking down the anti-Western axis, which might mean picking which enemy is your worst enemy.
Yes.
I think the other thing, let's actually have a listen to Trump and then sort of feedback on what he says in this clip.
Modestly successful comedian, President Zelensky talked the United States of America into spending $350 billion to go into a war that basically couldn't be won. He refuses to have elections, is low in the real Ukrainian polls. I mean, how can you be high with every city is being demolished? It's hard to be high. Somebody said, oh, no, his polls are good. Give me a break. A dictator without elections. Zelensky better move fast or he's not going to have a country left. Got to move fast because that war is going in the wrong direction. In the meantime, we're successfully negotiating an end to the war.
Well, it seems to me, I mean, I think some of those comments are unjustified, cruel and inaccurate, if I'm honest. But it does seem to me, like you said, you know, I think he's understood the personalities of both men. Zelensky's going to have to get more realistic about what he's going to accept in this, given that Russia are going to be more intransigent. Russia aren't going to sit down and go, oh, well, we won't have any of this territory. I mean, it's just not going to happen. The Golden Bridge. So I think he now needs to push Zelensky in a sort of bullying, firm type manner to get Zelensky where he needs to be. But I think he sort of thinks you can't do that to Putin, and that's probably true. And, you know, it's interesting. If you look at the behaviour of narcissists, which I'm pretty sure that Donald Trump is somewhere on that spectrum, that's not to say he's a bad person or anything, but I think we know that he has a particular personality type, as does Putin, actually. When someone with that personality type wants to get their own way, what they often do is love bomb the person first. They'll be really nice, really complimentary, very charming, very, publicly ostentatious, gregarious, charismatic, wanting to give gifts and presents, uses that to encircle and control somebody, and then starts to put the screws on. That is a typical sort of trope of narcissistic behaviour. And I kind of wonder if this is because this is what Putin did to little Kim Jong-un, wasn't it? I wonder if this is what he's doing with Trump. All the flattery, play his game, speak his lines, warm him up, make him think that he's the big I am, get him into a position where he thinks this is great, I'm on top, and then go, right, you want to stay on top? Back.
Yep. That's the only logical explanation for what he's saying, because Trump will know that what he said in that speech is factually incorrect. Zelensky, his popularity is about the same level as Trump's popularity. In if you were to run a poll, the Ukrainian constitution stops there being elections when there's martial law. So
how did you have elections? Polling stations would be targeted by Russia now.
Well, very much so. And how do you get them free and fair into the areas that have been occupied? Zelensky, as part of his plan, had suggested freezing the front lines where they are at the moment to stop the fighting, and then he would try and get that territory back at some stage in the future through diplomacy. And his requirement for doing that was NATO membership. The Trump team said no to the NATO membership, but that could have been done to get the Russians to the negotiating table. And therefore, there's so much going on here. What we're finding is commentators, ourselves, and the mainstream media are latching on to individual phrases and trying to analyse those to death, when the reality is we don't have the information to put the level of analysis into it that a lot of people are coming out with. So we're getting a lot of opinions that are spinning things left, right and centre. I think this is one time when we should have a bit of soak time, and I think you're exactly right. Trump will, once he's got the Russians on the hook and has started to reel them in and got them into that keep net, will turn around and say, OK, I've got you, you're under control, this is what's going to happen.
This is how
I hope that's what he's going to do.
Well, similarly, I've heard other people say that he's going to sort of start an energy war with drill, baby, drill, which will massively undermine Russia. And, Putin ain't going to be around forever. And I think that at the same time, there is something admirable about saying that, America and Russia have been foes for, decades and decades and decades now, despite glasnost and perestroika. And actually trying to resolve that somehow. Sometimes you're not going to get along with someone, you're going to disagree on a load of stuff, but you've got to work together, and that is better than war.
It is, and there's another factor that's coming in here that the Americans, I think, will be thinking about. Russia is very close to defeat. No matter what people say, the war's not going to be won on how the front line's moving. It could be lost if it collapses from the Ukrainian side, but it's not going to collapse. It's going to be won at what we call the operational level. So it's all of these attacks that are attacking the Russian oil infrastructure, their manufacturing capability. The Russian economy is teetering on the edge of collapsing. Putin can't recruit enough people into the military. Another 12 months of this and Russia could collapse. If Russia collapses politically, Russia is not a homogenous state. It's a federation of little statelets. If Russia collapses and falls apart, we've got lots of little statelets with nuclear weapons. It would make the breakup of Yugoslavia seem like a Sunday school picnic.
Wow.
And that's something that the world couldn't afford. And therefore, Trump will be, if he's being really smart, and I'll put a big if in there, will have one eye on doing enough to end the war, but not doing enough for the Russian government to collapse completely and Russia to collapse, because all hell will break loose then.
Well, this is the thing. Geopolitics is four-dimensional chess at the very least. Look, Vincent's just mentioned saying Trump ain't no Henry Kissinger and ain't going to win no peace prize. Well, Henry Kissinger wasn't president. And this is the point. Trump is going to be surrounded by people who are skilled geopoliticians and strategists and understand the bigger picture and will be advising him. And one has to assume, and what I've heard other people say about Trump, and I know a very dear friend of, I don't mean Nigel, a very dear American friend of Donald Trump's, one of his bezzers, and this guy said to me over dinner at Christmas, Trump is actually on Ukraine's side. He doesn't like Russia. You need to understand that. And he said that to me privately. And one has to assume that is true. Jenny in Oxford, Trump's comments align America with Russia and its strategic alliance partners, China, Iran and North Korea. Trump is angry as Zelensky wouldn't sign his extortion deal over rare earth minerals. Well, look, Is it an extortion deal, or is that just savvy? Because this is what China does in other countries. It's what Russia itself does in Africa.
Yeah.
Destabilising regimes to get access to whether it's uranium or lithium. This is kind of part of it. You know, you can't be nice in this game. You've got to go for what's important. And he's not an idiot.
Yeah.
Trump will know. He'll have been told that Russia has been in hock with Iran, China and North Korea. Everyone's going to be sitting down telling him this. They're all going to be telling him this is what they're doing to you in America as well. Yeah. So he's going to be aware of that. And if this is about, like you said, creating a wedge and trying to begin to break up that bloc by actually going, OK, Russia will talk to you, drag you a bit away from China, then that is actually a very savvy move. We're going to come back to this topic, of course, because it remains the big topic of the day, stroke week, stroke month, stroke year. But let's go back to a bit of domestic politics before we take a break. Now, linking this back to some of the things that Russia does, which is using mass migration as an act of grey zone warfare, and J.D. Vance saying at that Munich Security Conference, the problem is you guys, you let yourself be played over here in Europe. Here's a brilliant example. We know that mass migration is being used deliberately to destabilise us, and yet again and again and again and again, legal rulings over these people turning up into our country, playing us for fools, gaslighting us, lying to our faces, trying to basically extort our own system. They have no interest in being here. They're not really refugees, but they seem to get away with it. And this is just farcical. An asylum seeker who is at least 23 years old, he's got a receding hairline and a thick beard. But judges said he was a child. A child, for goodness sake. What is wrong with the judges? Philip, what is wrong with them? How have they gone bad like this?
We've got a real problem with the judiciary in this country, and someone needs to sit up. And you know, the top judge or person responsible, Lord Harmer, is at the centre of lots of the problems that seem to be going on around government at the moment. You know, there needs to be a root and branch review of their approach to, because everything seems to be a ruling that goes against the values and standards of this country, goes against logic itself, and plays into the hands of people who are trying to destabilise us.
They wield way too much influence, and they're frankly deluded, and they all come from the same set. We all know the sort of people they are. You know, they're these sort of elite leftists who want to be the do-gooder, shower themselves in moral rectitude. I did this today, I'm such a good person. And I mean, sorry, the name I'm going to say now is pretty much, it encapsulates that description. Not that names should do that, but come on, this guy's called Hugo Norton-Taylor. Hugo Norton-Taylor, who previously permitted a Palestinian family of 6 to stay in the UK with the refugee scheme created for Ukrainians. Well, I would suggest that Hugo Norton-Taylor should probably be removed from his position. Right, we're going to take a short break now, but when I come back, I want to hear from you. Even if you're called Hugo Norton-Taylor, especially you, if Hugo is listening, give me a call and explain yourself, sunshine, because you might not be elected, but you should be accountable. Otherwise, if you're not Hugo Norton-Taylor, you can still get in touch with the programme. 0344499 1000 is the number to call. It's charged at your standard network rate, not the exorbitant fees that Hugo Norton-Taylor would likely bill you for. And 8722 is the number to text. You can write the word talk before your text to make sure it wends its way into this little mini Cape Canaveral setup here and doesn't go a few floors below to other studios. 0344499 1000 is also the number to send me a WhatsApp or leave me a voice note. And we're on X at talkTV. Back after this.
are listening to this who don't live in London, and they'll be thinking, oh, well, that's all
Listen
very
to the
well for you.
moaners.
But at the very least, the cost of living is lower in other parts of the country that you don't feel like you can't feel
The flights
TfL
from
physically
London.
reaching into your wallet and taking your money out. And it might be TfL, but it might just be somebody doing that, because that's now a thing. Since when did that become a thing again?
My rental price has gone up. It's doubled in 4 years.
Unbelievable.
Doubled in 4 years.
Unbelievable.
And this is the thing. I know so many people moving out of London now, me included. I'm getting out.
Yeah.
I hate it.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show. It's your turn to tell me what you think about all of the day's events here and around the world. Let's speak now to Andrew, who's in Hertfordshire. Hi, Andrew.
Hi, great to speak to you. Great to see Philip in the studio. Look, I think Trump's been played here. He's got basically someone who was selling real estate in Florida in the negotiations, which is bordering on comical. Putin is very, very straightforward here. It's all about power. He tells lies, and Trump is actually coming out and giving them currency. So it's all right to tell a lie, but when you retell it, it gets a currency. And if you were China, I'd just walk into Taiwan now, because it just goes to show America's weak. And America's been weak since Obama refused to attack Syria when they deployed mustard gas.
Well, one could actually say America's been weak since Obama said to Putin, here you go, keep Crimea, lad. I think that was the beginning of the problem, frankly. I just want to bring in good old Big Phil here, as you're pleased to see him in the studio, as am I, whenever he graces me with his presence. Is this, I mean, again, we're sitting here, armchair commentators, supposing we know what's going on. We're taking everything at face value, going, well, you know, clearly Trump is very much on the side of Putin, just repeating lies willy-nilly. Of course, evidentially, that could well be the case, but we're also sort of adding to that the supposition that that would be possibly an extreme interpretation. It's more likely, given the advisors who will be around him, that he has a strategy. But again, we just don't know.
We've not got enough information to know, and there's always been speculation around Trump having, or Putin having, some form of compromat over Trump, and therefore have some form of control over him. Whenever he was president last time, he had a long meeting one-on-one with Putin, with no interpreters, no officials, or anyone else present. That was completely unprecedented, and therefore we've seen the Steele papers that came out with various accusations in them and all the rest of it. So it's as easy to speculate that Putin has got control of Trump as it is to speculate that Trump's got good advisors and is trying to play some clever tactic here. The bottom line is we just don't know. We don't have enough information to properly assess it.
Ironically, it'd be easy to speculate that Ukraine had compromat over the Biden family as well.
Well, yes,
frankly.
exactly.
So this is the thing. It's all a big screaming mess, quite frankly, and all we want is to make sure that there isn't World War III. And I think we're just going to have to get ourselves on a sure footing, prepare ourselves for the worst, and sit back and wait. Because, frankly speaking, look, Keir Starmer's going to jet off over to Washington to try and have his Churchillian moment, but I just don't really think that I don't think that Starmer's got it in him to sort of suddenly change Trump's mind and go, oh great, yeah, this is all sorted.
Well, and the trouble is, from Trump and Trump's team's perspective, Starmer he's the Democrats. He is Biden too. And Trump will treat him that way. Trump likes the UK, and therefore will go, okay, it's representing the UK. I want my invite to the palace to King Charles and all the rest of it. So Trump will do that, but Starmer's not the right sort
Let's
of person.
imagine the sort of people that Trump actually would listen to when it comes to the European leaders, when it comes to, garnering opinions on what Europe thinks. Unfortunately, the person he's most likely to listen to, I would imagine, would be Viktor Orban, because that's the person I'd say most like Trump. What do we also know about Viktor Orban? Well, he's mates with Putin.
Pro-Putin.
So, you know, I think we're in a difficult situation now where all these sort of, you know, lily-livered leftists who have run Europe for too long will not have Trump's respect. So when they come to him and say, listen, please take us seriously, he's going to be like, you've stuffed it up for too long. Why should I listen to you?
And again, Trump will like chaos in Europe because the EU, as a trading bloc, we look at things from an economic perspective, is a trading rival to the United States. So if he can keep chaos going out through Europe, through all the members of the EU, and stop that trading bloc coming together, it gives better opportunities for the US, who can speak with one voice, i.e. Trump's, to go out and do make economic deals around the world. There's so many. This is I think more than 4D chess. I think we're up to about 6 or 7D chess at the minute.
Yeah, it is. It's insane. Andrew, thank you so much for your call. Let's quickly speak to John, who's in Glasgow. Hi, John.
Hi, good morning. Just a question for Phil. Exactly what power does he think Zelensky has to be at the negotiating table, as Putin doesn't respect him and doesn't fear him, but he fears Trump?
Yeah, I think this is what is quite important. The fact that you've now got America sitting down with Russia, that was the only way we were ever going to get to some sort of resolution, because it clearly wasn't going to be borne out by Ukraine suddenly winning the war, was it? Let's be real. So this is the only way we're going to have some sort of resolution. And frankly speaking, I'd actually be more alarmed right now if Trump and Putin were yelling insults at each other out in the public domain. That would really send shivers down my spine. That would chill me to the bone if that was what was taking place. So, you know, you can't have your cake and eat it with this one, can you?
Well, you can't. And people have to recognise that war isn't in isolation. War is diplomacy by other means. It's whenever the politicians fail to talk that the shooting starts. The shooting then goes on to set the conditions for the talking to start again. So there has to be talking. But to get that talking going, you have to have all of those that have got their fingers in the pie round the table. But before you can get them round the table, you have to understand exactly what their start position is so that you can actually point their finger at the pie to put it in there, because there's no point. If you've got someone who's shooting way off one direction, someone else is shooting way off in the other direction, there's no point in sitting together until you can find some common ground to try and drag them together, because that would just make the negotiator look foolish.
Yeah, and sometimes you've got to butter up someone's ego to get them to the table in the first place. And it's funny, talking about the hypocrisy of European leaders especially, because frankly most of them should go into the dustbin of history. The way they have dealt with other countries who are equally as evil as Russia, pose equal a threat. I mean, China. For crying out loud, Starmer was on the first plane out to China to buy windmills and solar panels and bolster the Chinese economy. All the while they're undercutting us, messing about with cables undersea, doing all these malign activities that Russia does. The same could be said, frankly, of Iran, who countries like France and Germany thought, oh, well, you know, let's have a little deal where we normalise things and start to trade with them again and get them round the table and be nice because we want to sell stuff to them. And then, oh, there they go, arming the Houthi rebels and Hamas and Hezbollah and trying to wreak disaster over in the Middle East. So, you know, Europe often doesn't really have its act together, especially when it comes to industrial policy. It's the weakness of Europe economically, because it dances around to net zero tunes and all of these myths and legends purported to be morally good, that it's made itself a manufacturing basket case, and so now has to go cap in hand to dictator regimes, whether it be for windmills and solar panels or gas or oil. And this has been the issue for a long time. It's this managed decline of Europe. Blimey, sorry about that. Thank you for your call, John, in Glasgow. Now, before we go to break, let me tell you how you could be the recipient of £25,000 just for making a call or sending a text. This is it.
It's competition time, and we're giving you a chance to win a whopping £25,000. So what do you need to do to get involved? All you have to do is text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post. It's as simple as that. Once again, to get involved, just text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post.
18 plus, UK excluding NI. Enter by SMS for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on March the 3rd, 2025. Or send your name, email and contact number to £25,000 cash competition, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on March the 6th, 2025. This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
Well, there you go. We're here for you. You can call that your Rachel Reeves Resilience Reward. So if you're participating in that, very good luck. We're going to take a short break now, but there's so much more to discuss, so don't go anywhere. I'm back just after this.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello there. Welcome back to the show. Alex Phillips here with you until 1 o'clock today and tomorrow, and joined in the studio by the gorgeous, erudite, brilliant, courageous Big Phil. Philip Ingram. Do you like me calling you Big Phil? Does that get on your nerves? I have a feeling you sort of wince every time I say it.
No, I've changed the name on my phone to Big Phil.
Have you
go.
actually
Yes,
done
I have
that?
actually done that.
I love
so there we go.
Amazing. It's now sort of spread throughout the Talk offices. I think all the producers now talk about you as Big Phil.
Big Phil.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
No,
Big
I
Phil
wear it
show.
as a badge of honour.
It is a badge of honour. Now, would it be a badge of honour to have gone and served in Ukraine? Is that a particularly military medal that our troops want to be bearing in the future? Because, of course, Sir Keir Starmer, straight out of the box in the early stages of these negotiations, saying we've got to step up and play our part in Europe, and I would be willing, depending what the outcome is, to commit British troops to a demilitarised zone to make sure that Russia can't march straight back into Ukraine. Of course, outrage from certain subsets. Olaf Scholz definitely not happy about this. The Germans stormed out of a meeting, almost weeping like his counterpart, who is that Munich Security Conference director. I mean, the Germans, though, they're the ones who got us into a lot of this mess. But I've heard different views on this. A lot of people in the public going, how dare you commit largely white working class men who you don't give a stuff about, whose veterans you don't treat well at all, over to the front line while you sit in your ivory towers. You know, this just smacks in the face of hypocrisy and exploitation. But then other people are saying, well, hold on. We're saying we need to build up our armed forces. Those armed forces will need training. And actually going and being in a demilitarised zone for protecting the peace of Europe, being able to learn about modern warfare. The Ukrainians have done genius things on the battlefield with drones and so on and so forth. So really actually understanding the enemy with real-world practice is not half bad if you want to become an important military presence again in the new, within the new world order. So various different opinions out there on this. Let's get the opinion of the Conservative Shadow Minister for National Security, Alicia Kearns MP. Alicia, it's fantastic to have you on the programme. First of all, I want to get your reaction on the idea of the UK participating in what could potentially be a 30,000-strong Ukrainian peacekeeping force.
Long term, we have stood shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine more than any other country. However, it is far too premature to be committing our troops. I don't deal in hypotheticals when it comes to putting our people on the ground. We don't know what the terms of any peace deal will be. We don't even know if there will be a peace deal at this point. And imagine if it's a peace deal that actually gives Russia more territory than what they currently have, let alone the territory they're currently illegally holding. Are we really going to be willing to reinforce that, essentially suggesting that it's a just and fair peace? I'm really concerned because we know the Trump regime just want a end of fighting, but we in Europe need a solution that essentially protects us from any further expansionism or imperialism from Putin, not just the end of fighting at any cost. So I've been very critical of this because I think we have to be really cautious and signing up proactively to something when clearly there's no European agreement. Right. And actually, because Keir Starmer announced it, he then went to Paris and Europe looks more ununified or with more disunity between them because he didn't come out of that meeting with agreement on it.
Well, the difficulty is, of course, Europe doesn't really need our help to look disunified, and that's been the sort of pattern that's played out from the start when Boris Johnson was Prime Minister and was quite affirmative in his action about going to the aid of Ukraine, while Europe wrung their hands and failed to do anything and dithered and allowed, basically, this war of attrition to build up. I think they've basically been the authors of this for a long time. But I do take your point. I think that when you've sort of said, well, yeah, I might commit troops, you've said it out loud, it's kind of hard to row back on that without looking weak. One thing I want to ask you about, as your Shadow Minister for National Security, is about some of the other things that Russia does and whether actually, Starmer turning around and saying we're going to commit troops and being very vocal about what Putin might see as destabilising this agreement he may or may not have with America, how that might then have reverberations here. Because we know that Russian agents have been committing arson attacks against weapons depots, amongst other things. There was that curious case of the DHL cargo plane with an explosive device on it. We know they're using mass migration as grey zone warfare, and we're frankly, letting them get away with it. We know that they patrol their submarines through the channel, no doubt sniffing around for undersea cables. We know all these things. We know that Russia are basically already at war with us, albeit not with tanks and bombs. How much are we potentially provoking now Russia from coming after us with even more, possibly attacks on critical infrastructure, possibly mass cyber hacks? I mean, we're in a delicate position, aren't we?
We are, and your point is really important. An absence of traditional conflict does not mean we're at peace, and I've been saying this for a long time. Putin sees himself as at war with us. They murdered people on our soil, let alone all the other things you've mentioned, whether it be their nuclear proliferation, whether it be underwater sea cables, their submarines, you name it. But the point I'd make is that consistently over the last 20 years, we have taken Putin at his word and we have underestimated Ukraine. In the same way, we have allowed Putin to be the strong man while we have attempted to always play the nice guy doing diplomacy right. Putin responds to strength. We have to be absolutely affirmative about what we will do to defend Europe. That is what he needs to see from us. Because what happened, whether it's the Budapest Agreement, where we made Ukraine give up their nuclear weapons and Britain said, we will defend you in the future and make sure this doesn't happen, and Putin promised he wouldn't invade. Whether it's when he then invaded Georgia and nothing happened, when he then invaded Ukraine in 2014 and nothing happened, and then in obviously 2022, when I was in Ukraine 10 days before the renewed illegal invasion, I had, as you said, French and German ambassadors saying to me, your intelligence is wrong, Macron has such a good relationship with Putin, he would know if this was coming. We said it was going to happen. British intelligence is the highest quality in the world. We need to stop underestimating Putin and taking him at his word, and we have to show force. So no, I don't think it's worrying us saying that we will have red lines, that we will defend Ukraine and be with them to the end. But the request of peacekeeping forces did not come from Ukraine, because they don't know what any deal is going to look like, and it has to be them asking us, not Trump, and I don't know if it was Trump, but I have some suspicions it may have come from the US authorities, or us proactively suggesting things when we have no idea what the terms are. No business would say, yes, we're happy to lend you some staff for however many years, but we've got no idea the terms or conditions under which they'd be deploying. It's just not the right thing to do.
Now, you are Shadow Minister, which puts you in a different position, but were you the actual Minister for National Security, how much would you also be advising the government, given that Russia likes to exploit weakness? And in this sense, we're talking about military weakness. That's what you have outlined, and, foreign strategic weakness. But how much of the exploitative power of Russia has latched on to other areas of weakness, such as net zero policy, being able to basically get Europe in a vice-like grip because Germany shut down its nuclear power stations, because we've sort of been bleeding dry our own fossil fuel resources and then switching them off altogether? How much also is our weakness when it comes to open borders being exploited by Russia, being able to bus coachloads of people over to the border of Poland and Belarus, being able to drive mass migratory flows with Wagner mercenaries out of Africa? We have actually essentially allowed ourselves to be ridden roughshod over, for want of a better phrase, because we have, like you said, tried to be too nice, tried to be the world's good guys. How much of our actual uncombined overall strategic policy when it comes to all these issues, energy, open borders, is itself weak and needs to have a wake-up call and be tethered more to geopolitical reality?
Look, everything needs to be tethered to geopolitical realities, because if you don't have national security, you can't have economic security. And I've long had this argument with so many people who say to me, no, economics is what matters. You can't have an economy if you are vulnerable geopolitically. That is what we learned in 2022 when Ukraine was invaded and the whole world suddenly saw an impact on their energy bills, but also on so many other things, and Africa started realising it wasn't getting the food it needed. We have to recognise that autocratic states, they are at a benefit compared to us in that they can deploy every single arm of their state towards one singular outcome, and it's a lot more easy. Democracies are inherently more vulnerable, but also more difficult for us to really focus our efforts. That doesn't mean we are wrong to have a democracy. It is the right thing to do. But yes, there's no question that we need to recognise every aspect of our society is under attack. People need to recognise that they all have a role in our national security. Since the Iraq War, essentially we have said to the public, Don't you worry your little heads about national security and defence. The government's got it. But actually, everyone needs to recognise that whether you choose to be on TikTok or not, which is a weaponised platform, who you invite to come and give speeches, who you endorse, who you support, the information theatre is without question one of the biggest. But how you choose to get your energy supplies, the way in which you work with other countries. Look at Nord Stream 2, where we saw how Russia weaponised that. You are absolutely right about how they've weaponised migrationary flows, particularly around Poland and Moldova and countries like that. Every aspect of our society, civil society, government, academia, is under attack. And that is why for so long I have been a broken record saying that if we really want to protect our country, we need to look at every single aspect, and no one in any sphere or any age can abdicate themselves from having responsibility towards our shared national security.
Yeah, here, I agree. It'd be great to have a government who actually puts some of those thoughts and ideas into practice for once. Now, before I let you go, Alicia, I think one of the biggest debates going on right now in this country across Europe is military spending. This government has currently said, well, we're going to get to the 2.5% of GDP on defence spending that is that has been recommended, although we don't seem to have a pathway to get there. And then you've got military chiefs going, well, this is a joke. That's not even going to touch the sides. What should we be spending, and what do we need to sacrifice in order that we can pay for it?
2.5% is a starting point, not an end state. We were very clear that we would reduce the size of the civil service and take from the research and development budget in order to get us that 2.5%. We had a very clear plan. I'm less obsessed than others on a specific percentage. I'm focused on the effect that we can achieve with our armed forces. So if I was in charge of the SDSR, rather than focusing on a specific percent of GDP, I'd be saying these are the ways in which we need to be able to deploy. These are the capabilities and scientific advantages that we need to be focusing on. So all the AUKUS work is phenomenal, particularly the phase 2, kind of what people often call the sexy, more scientific tech weaponry bit of it, rather than the submarines that everyone focuses on. It's about the specific effect we can have. And if we can have the effects that I need us to have as a country that keeps us safe, that then may translate into a specific percentage of GDP. Fantastic, in which case we can hang our hats on that. But it's about effect and how we can defend our country and pursue our interests abroad to keep us safe.
Alicia Kearns, MP, Conservative, Shadow Minister for National Security, thank you ever so much for coming on the programme. You were nodding away there, Phil. I mean, look, I agree with what she's saying, but I still think it's sort of, you know, messing about around the edges. I think that we need to be on a bigger war footing, and we actually need to go, do you know what? Net zero, We're just pausing it, we're stopping it, we're getting oil and gas out, we've got to put ourselves on disaster footing, frankly, which means actually you're going to have to throw in the bin some of these other, albeit they good intentions, in order to afford what we need to pump into the military.
Well, you know, they throw Chagos out, and that gives us 19 billion immediately they can go in.
Right.
You start throwing this GB energy out, there's another few billion that come in. So there's lots the government could do today. You know, Alicia is one of the few MPs who talks total common sense and talks it logically and can see clear paths to things. It's a shame she's not in government. But there is a lot being spouted out around at the moment. You know, Starmer talking about troop numbers. He will have an idea what troop numbers would be needed for different scenarios, because the J5 Plans branch at strategic headquarters in our Joint Force headquarters will be planning different options and refining them as political direction comes in. Trump will almost certainly have told Starmer, go to Europe and tell them that you're going to take a lead. And therefore, you know, that's why Starmer will have done it. And Trump will have done that knowing Europe will fall apart. I've planned these sorts of operations. I've done it twice. They've been successful. I've gone to holiday now to the countries that are nice and peaceful and worth
Big
worth
Phil,
visiting.
you're going to go to Ukraine?
I will go to Ukraine quite happily. But you know, they are hugely complex. We're a long way off boots being on the ground. And now, there's an awful lot of things to happen in between.
Super briefly, because Ted's saying in my ear, let's break. He's going to glare at me through the glass. I know he just rolled his eyes. He's smiling. I just want to ask you really quickly, because I always think when people are listening to this, we need to unpack things and make sure they're, you know, on board with what's being discussed. Alicia Kearns mentions AUKUS there, which we talk about casually. Some people listen and be like, what? Is that some sort of mythical animal? This is essentially the Defence Pact, or sort of sharing of resources between Australia the UK and the US.
Correct.
Now, a positive thing on the horizon, fingers crossed and pray to the Lords of Elections, is that Canada might soon have a new Prime Minister in the form of Pierre Poilievre, who'd be quite keen on joining that.
Yes, it's bringing a nuclear-powered submarine capability, so an attack submarine capability, and sharing the technology around different countries. And of course, UK, US, Australia are all part of Five Eyes, so it's easy at these high classification areas. Canada is in there, and the controversy behind it was the Australians were going to buy conventional submarines from France, but they're limited by range. Australia recognised the growing threat that there is and recognised they needed something better, so wanted a nuclear submarine, and that allowed then UK, US and Australia to come together because we need to replace our nuclear submarines, as does nuclear-powered submarines, as do the Americans and all the rest of it. These are not submarines that are carrying nuclear weapons. They're nuclear-powered. They're nuclear-powered.
And wouldn't it be great if we all said, oh, do you know what, we could make pop-up power stations with these as well and share that technology. Honestly, if the Anglosphere really actually did better at working together, not that there's a terrible job, but imagine how powerful we could be. Right, now, I am going to go for that break. There you go, Ted, doff cap. But I'm going to be back in just a few minutes.
Russian army can do nothing with Ukrainians, despite they're bigger than we, despite that they have more weapons, and so on, so on. They can do nothing. They have lost minimum 300,000 people being killed in Ukraine. Can you imagine? 300,000 killed, not less than 600,000 injured. That's absolutely dramatic losses for Russia, but they don't want to stop because they don't care about their losses. And yes, now they will put all their energy inside Ukraine, try to destroy Ukraine from inside.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello there. Welcome back to the show. Let's quickly jog around some of your messages before switching lanes and talking about Meghan Markle. I know it's another war zone, but, you know, sort of a slightly different pallor. Mark in Surrey says, great to hear from Mr. Ingram, a voice of reason and common sense. Putin is clear about his imperialist ambitions for a Russia running from China to the Atlantic. Obama telegraphed weakness, creating the conditions which we now face. Now, this is interesting. Speaking to Benedict Spence yesterday, he said, don't forget, Russia and China share what could be a pretty fractious border. They might not always hold hands. So perhaps this sort of divide and conquer approach could be very beneficial to the overall world order. Matt in Staffordshire says Britain will never again have an effective and motivated armed forces. The heroes of yesteryear had a great and proud principled nation to defend. There's nothing left here to be proud of now, and no reason for anybody to risk their lives to defend a nation whose lefty ruling classes hates them. You say that, that's pretty... I mean, look, I think a lot of, you know, younger people and leftists think that way, but we don't think that way, do we? We actually go down the opposite route. We think there's lots to be proud of in Britain, and we've actually got to fight for it. We can't be defeatist and let those horrible, anti-patriotic, woke, wet weekend... I've thought of another word begins with W that Ofcom doesn't allow. We can't let them dominate the conversation and lead the narrative. They're actually the minority in this country. And you know what? When push comes to shove, when I go into a Wetherspoons, I know that most of the men drinking their craft beers and their IPAs in there would put their pints down in a moment and go out and defend this country. So I don't want them being spoken down to either. We just need to make sure that in future, we give them what they deserve and not completely erode our working classes and take them for granted, which successive governments have done. And that way we will, again, rise out of the ashes to be a nation that can be proud of itself, defend itself, promote itself and begin to progress. Putin thinks he can get away with everything when it comes to us, says Glenn, who also says Alicia is right, but you're right too. Thanks, Glenn. We don't want to look weak. I worry about my 3 children as I have 3 boys, 3 military age. This could well impose army conscription. Well, do you know what? A lot of countries in Europe, even now, still have conscription. They still have national service. Is that a bad thing? I'm a reformer and supporter of reform, but somewhat disappointed we haven't, to my knowledge, heard from Nigel regarding the Trump debacle regarding Ukraine. Now, it's interesting, Nigel has indeed been very quiet on this matter. I was spooling through his X account the other day. There was one interview, or I think it's at one conference, party conference, where he did say, well, you know, in the long term, we will have to consider Ukraine joining NATO. But he has been extremely cautious on this. I think we're waiting to see what he might say, given that he is there defending the UK, and I'm pretty sure that Nigel has no truck with Putin, but is, of course, you know, big fan of Trump and the MAGA movement. But he is at CPAC right now. He is due to be speaking at CPAC very late tonight, actually, 8:30 our time tonight, and so we're going to pick up on what he has to say at CPAC tomorrow, because let's see if he mentions it, and let's see if actually he's going to keep the British end up over in Washington DC. Now, talking about all things America, something that they exported to us, and we said, do you know what, thanks for that, but we're going to send it back from whence it came, was Madame Markle. And she's back in the headlines again, isn't she? Because her sort of vomit-inducing, self-aggrandizing, narcissist project of, look at me, isn't my life better than yours, and I can show you how to be as prim and proper and perfect as me, is going to launch on Netflix soon, after she had to abandon it to go and look prim, proper, perfect and compassionate over in wildfires in California she had nothing to do with. But anyway, her project has hit a few obstacles, it seems. First of all, it was named Riviera something or the other, and that name had to be dropped because it was nicked from someone else. The logo's been nicked from Mallorca's crest of arms or something like that, and so she's changed it to being called As Ever. Yep, as corny and as cringeworthy as ever. Well, it turns out that even As Ever is being nicked. Apparently a New York family clothing brand has said that it's received an outpouring of concern because that is their name. Oh, it never rains, but it pours over in Montecito. Let's speak now to Angela Livin, royal biographer. Angela, great to have you on the programme. I mean, they just she sleepwalks and staggers into the next difficulty. Is that just because, you know, people are just set against her now, so they want to throw grenades in her direction? Or is she just clueless?
Well, the interesting thing is that not many people have mentioned is that she couldn't find someone who could take control of what she wanted to do. So she's named herself now as a CEO. So she doesn't get advice. She won't listen to anything that people tell her because she is Meghan and she knows better. So she's making a complete mess of everything she touches because she doesn't know how to run a big company, but she thinks she does. So that's, I think, the main reason why it's hopeless. I mean, it's not difficult to look things up and find that someone else has got the same name, so then you don't take it. I mean, right. But she's not interested. But what I think is absolutely the worst thing is for her to go on Instagram, because her husband, who she showed so much love to her. She couldn't stop kissing him and stroking his neck and all that. He does not like social media. He really doesn't. He's been working for years to stop families letting their children watch. I mean, they've even set up something special for that, of people whose children have died because they've been watching social media. But Meghan couldn't care less.
Oh, she loves it. She needs it. That's, you know, she's sort of, that is what her life is. But let's talk about those two, actually, because not long ago, it looks like all wasn't happy in the Hollywood Hills. They were doing lots of separate events. Was this a PR strategy to sort of break the brands down into two different cohorts? Or do you think there are issues going on inside that marriage?
Oh, I think there's an amazing number of issues going inside that marriage. And mainly it's because Meghan keeps changing on what matters to her. So 1 minute she can't stand for Harry anymore, and she tells him to go away. So he goes away and does what he was doing years ago before he ever knew her, the sort of charities. And then she realized she can't do it without him. Invictus Games, just right. I can present myself, I can have the cameras looking at me all the time, so I've got to keep on kissing Harry. So she does that. It's all according to what she needs and what she wants. I mean, she is absolutely awful. So poor old Harry, except it is his own fault, isn't it? It doesn't have to be there, just follows. And she puts him on one thing she's doing. He's on for, half a minute.
Most of the time, let's be fair, she makes him look like a total prat. She's sitting there doing some sort of me video and he has to juggle looking through the window or something like that. It's, oh my God, how appalling. What a way to treat your husband. He had his 40th birthday alone, and he went off with friends. They didn't even spend that together. He went hiking somewhere. That seems like a bit of a midlife crisis breakdown of marriage act.
Yeah, but I think he just feels that when she wants him, he will come. But actually, what we saw in Invictus Games made you want to be sick, actually, because that's not the way to behave, is it? And now, when she was doing this as ever, I hope she's not as ever, because she's so awful now. Perhaps she can change a little bit. But if she does as ever, he said one word, it's running. So you recognise the voice, you knew he was there, he had nothing more to do with it. She just wants him hanging around if ever he's needed. It's just terrible.
Oh, poor thing. You make him sound like a victim of domestic abuse. Kenny from Edinburgh says, hi, Alex, why doesn't Meghan Markle name her brand Wannabe but never will? As ever wouldn't do, even if she hadn't nicked it. I mean, this is the thing. A lot of people say the world is pretty cruel to Meghan. Perhaps she's just, shaped a bit differently from the rest of us and isn't really a bad person. But she attracts a huge amount of, public kickback, doesn't she? I mean, you've just said she's awful, she's terrible. I mean, let's substantiate that. What makes her so wicked?
Well, I think what makes her so wicked is that she couldn't care less about anybody else. And things that Harry feels is very, very important. He doesn't want his children to be shown on TV. He really doesn't. So there's two things now that he's really important about. They're crashed. They don't care. She doesn't care. It has to be her. And I think also her lack of gratitude to the royal family, who not only made her one of the most famous women in the world, made her one of the richest women in the world. But she moans and groans. She likes to be a victim. So every now and then she finds a good reason why things are not fair.
And it's never her fault. Angela, thank you ever so much for coming on to the show. Poor old Meghan, not. Right, we're going to take a short break now. Put on the kettle, get yourself a nice brew and come back in just a moment because there's so much more news coming up. This is Alex Phillips here on Talk, the home of common sense. I am back just after this. Looking forward to having your company for 2 more hours.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to the show. I've always thought, do you know what Talk could do? It could have a special sort of subscriber-only feature where they get to listen to the conversations during advert breaks. Because that's where some of the best material is lost on the public.
But I think Ofcom might be coming in with a few comments if they listen to our conversations. It'd be a special subscriber function that isn't broadcast on the radio because it's during the advert breaks.
Then we so it would actually just be online and then Ofcom can jog on.
Yeah,
well,
perfect.
not quite because they want to get them dirty little hands on that as well. But we'll find a way. We'll get some servers over in India or something. But yeah, we were just wargaming. If I were to be the Prime Minister, who's going to be in my cabinet? Obviously, Big Phil is going to be in charge of defence. Julia Hartley-Brewer, she's Foreign Minister. Yeah, send her over to Putin's big white table. That's the only thing that'll have him like scratching around and crawling back into his big white COVID tunnels. Boo, the power of Julia. Kevin O'Sullivan, I don't know, court jester. We love Kev. No, actually, he needs something connected to like Royal Envoy. You know, he's the one who does all the
Royal Envoy. Yeah. Royal Correspondent.
Royal Correspondent. It's not really a cabinet, is it? I don't know that. I don't know what.
Yeah, but you can change the cabinet any way you want to.
Minister for Buckingham Palace.
Yes,
exactly. I'll just invent a position for him. Minister without portfolio.
Minister without portfolio.
Yeah. Anyway, so it's a great idea in Fantasyland, but you never know. One day it may well happen. Just saying. I was saying to them, I've got a strategic plan longer than Xi Jinping's. Right, now, let's go on to talking about whether we have a strategic plan as long as Xi Jinping's. We certainly don't when it comes to managing our borders. We touched on this earlier. Just every single day. It doesn't matter what newspaper you open, although it wouldn't be in The Guardian. Some other madcap ruling about someone who's not been deported or had, fifth attempt at... having their extradition, their deportation overturned. Why do you get 5 strikes? It should be you can't be here by. How can you get to challenge it 5 times? I don't get to go to court repeatedly challenging doing 25 in a 20 mile per hour zone. I just got to take the points. I don't get to endlessly use taxpayers' money to defend myself and say this is nutty legislation anyway. So here you go. The latest one today, adding to the sort of litany of farce and it's not funny. This is a problem. None of this is actually funny. It does make you put your head in your hands. An asylum seeker who is at least 23 years old. He's got a receding hairline and a old beard, right? And not only that, he's got a wrinkly old face, according to people who've seen the photos. He's got crow's feet, a wrinkly forehead, and a broad chest. I mean, he sounds like, I don't know, he sounds like Vinnie Jones turning around and claiming to be 16 years old in need of a school place. But apparently this Sudanese migrant who arrived on British shores crossing the Channel is not a 16-year-old teenager. But and that's the Home Office who said that. The Home Office, basically did the thing, measure the teeth like a horse, get out, you're too old. But the decision has been overturned by immigration judges. Of course it has. In a recent tribunal, I think they're just on a racket here. The problem is, right, that the immigration judges defending these asylum seekers are earning a packet from it. And we're paying them, and we're also paying the government's bill as well. So it's us just paying for this ridiculous farcical game of legal ping pong when it should be get out of the country. The legal bills have totalled over £30,000, and it's the council who care for the man who he cannot be identified because of legal reasons has been lumbered with those bills. So, whoever is paying their council tax over wherever this person who can't be identified for legal reasons is being sheltered, you've now got to cough up £30,000, which could have been put towards filling potholes or, I don't know, doing things that the public actually want. It sickens me, this. Mm-hmm. It sickens me. And what really disturbed me the other day, so apparently this Hugo Norton-Taylor, who was among the judges that managed the tribunal, was the one who previously permitted a Palestinian family of 6 to stay in the UK via the Ukrainian refugee scheme. Now, that is clearly a bit of a wide bandwidth for interpretation of the law. And it was actually quite heartening for the first time to see Kemi Badenoch and Sir Keir Starmer both going, this legal ruling is wrong.
Yeah.
Parliament must have sovereignty over its borders. Oh, but what happens? Lady Chief Justice Carr, who also thinks, by the way, that judges should have their own special protection system, their own special police cars and drivers. I mean, what world does she live in? Turned around and said, oh, this sort of language attacking judges on the floor of Parliament is going to weaken the judicial system. It's authoritarian. I mean, these people are the authoritarians.
And they're undermining our values. I don't know how they're clearly interpreting some element of the law to allow them to make the judgments. And Parliament should therefore change the law. But I think Parliament should bring in something that doesn't allow the judges to come up with they're frankly very woke findings that they have all the time.
Can you imagine, right? Because I've sort of war gamed this one out for when I'm Prime Minister. You need basically a great repeal bill. You can't just get rid of the ECHR. You've got to get rid of all the nonsense that comes with it. The Human Rights Act, which has nothing to do with human rights. It's just the Legal Loophole Act. Criminal law covers the most parts of not being mean and nasty and doing horrible things to other people. You've got to get rid of all of that. You've also got to get rid of the supremacy of these judges and not enable them to ride roughshod. Lord Chancellor should be able to say, no, we're just going to discount that. Home Secretary should be like, you're deported and there's no appeal to this. Can you imagine a Britain that suddenly turned around and said, we're leaving the ECHR, we're getting rid of the Human Rights Act and we're stripping judges of their power? The outcry would be, whoa, they've gone tonto. They've basically become North Korea. That's the problem.
Yeah, of course. And this is where... but we've gone completely the other way. It seems that everything that the government tries to do, and successive governments try to do, is undermined as soon as it touches anything to do with the judiciary. And this is why the Rwanda scheme failed, because it wasn't because the government didn't get people off to Rwanda. They didn't get them on the aircraft because every time someone was trying to do it, was appealed and appealed and appealed and appealed, and it took time and time and time and time and time.
I think with that one, though, I've said from the beginning that I thought it was a mad idea, only because that was predictable.
Yeah.
And it's not a mad idea if that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
But I always said this is going to be the Conservative Party way of being able to come up with a plan that they know is going to be blocked and therefore be able to blame everybody but themselves and deflect responsibility. In many respects, we knew it would be a waste of time. We knew it wasn't going to get the job done. And I think in that regard, they knew it as well and so went along with it as a clever PR strategy. Cost us a load of money, though. But let's talk about this current government, because if we thought the Tories were pretty feckless, reckless and useless, this lot are just mind-bogglingly thick.
Yeah, well, Keir Starmer clearly said whenever everyone thought the previous government was completely useless, Keir Starmer said, hold my beer.
I know.
And he's
so that we're going to be the grown-ups in the room, back to sensible government. But you look at these people. Rachel Reeves, now a proven fibber, let's say. Embellisher and fibber. Are they big lies? Not necessarily, but they're big enough, I think, to warrant scrutiny, given that she's got such an important role.
If she had been employed in the City of London in an actual financial job and those untruths on her CV came out, she would be fired immediately.
Right.
Now, she's in charge of the City of London, and therefore there's double standards. More two-tier standards.
More two-tier standards. But also, it just strikes me as being a bit thick to be nicking company money to give presents to your bosses.
Yeah.
It strikes me as being a bit thick to, when you're going into politics, embellishing your CV, as if you're never going to have the scrutiny when you want some of the highest offices in the land. Same here with Jonathan Reynolds, the next one who's been a bit thick. The business secretary was told to stop claiming he was a solicitor on his CV by the lawyer's watchdog. Again, if you turn around and say, I'm a solicitor when you're not a solicitor, you then get barred from becoming a solicitor. But he stood in Parliament and said, back in the days when I was a solicitor in Manchester, far harder lifestyle than this as an MP. Excuse me, are you just a moron? First of all, who makes out like being an MP is like, oh, yeah, it's coasting this is easy. That's not exactly going to win you favour. But at the same time, this is lying in Parliament. And I would suggest, given the amount of flack that Boris Johnson got for being a serial liar, a fibber, an embellisher, an exaggerator, then given what they got him for, the petard from which he was hung, was basically, did he have cake, did he not have cake, and how long was he in a room inside his own blimmin' building where he worked anyway? frankly, this stuff, I'd say, if you can get done for being 10 minutes inside a room of staff that you were in and have to be in as part of your job, but all of a sudden cake was or was not added, and that is the defining factor of whether you stop being Prime Minister. Lying in front of Parliament that you are a solicitor, lying on your CV about the experience you have when you become Chancellor, I think is a bit bigger than blimmin' did you eat cake or not.
Well, there's a statute, and I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, but that protects solicitors, and if you call yourself a solicitor and you have not been registered and you're doing that, you're actually committing a criminal offence. You're breaking the law. And his excuse today was it was some of my aides that got the posting on LinkedIn wrong. But it couldn't be his aides, because I saw him giving a speech in Parliament where he said, and it's recorded in Hansard, therefore, I am a solicitor, or I was a solicitor. I'm sorry, he's lied. And this is where Keir Starmer's now got a Chancellor who's been proven to be lying, got a Business Secretary who's proven to be lying. His cabinet is a laughingstock.
Yeah, I mean, but, if they turned around and say if Rachel Reeves said, look, I admit I embellished my CV, it was a moment of stupidity, we've probably all done it, I thought I desperately wanted this job and thought that if I just sort of made things sound a teeny bit better, it would stand me in good stead to become a candidate. I mean, would that then be, well, she's admitted it, she must go? Or would people just go, well, fair enough, at least she's, accept. I don't know, because in politics, the problem is there is so much like, well, now someone's said they're sorry, they've got to be executed. I kind of think we've got, I mean, saying that, actually, I don't hear the legacy lead. I don't hear the Beth Rigby standing outside number 10 shouting, will you resign? Are you going to resign? Every time Rachel Reeves walks in, because, again, different rules for them as there were to the last government. But that is also has its sort of limitations playing
it does, but I think, in Rachel Reeves' case, if when the errors had come out, first of all, and she then corrected all of them and put it out there, whether she made a statement or not, I think it would have, the news would have moved on and she'd have got away with it. But once the errors came out and then we found more errors and more errors and more errors and more issues, then her position has become untenable. And with the Business Secretary, it's not just the errors, it's then the excuse that's turning around saying it was my aide. No, it can't be. You physically stood up in Parliament. They didn't write a speech for you that you read out.
Shall we? Because we like having the receipts, don't we, here at this channel? We love a bit of truth. We are the home of truth. Shall we see that speech?
Before the last election, I worked as a solicitor in Manchester city centre, and I would travel in to Manchester every day from what is now my constituency.
You didn't work as a solicitor, mate.
Bank to rights.
Or is that... Hold on. He was sort of working, training to be a solicitor. If he said when I was training as a solicitor...
But he said worked as a solicitor. As a solicitor.
Yeah.
Not training, not helping us from solicitors, not training to be a solicitor, as a solicitor.
And as a solicitor, the first thing you know is that when it comes to words matter.
Yes.
A comma in a sentence can change everything when it comes to a contract or evidence given in court. So words do matter.
And speaking in the chamber in Parliament, it's recorded in Hansard, and that's where the most important words that matter are spoken and formally noted.
Do you remember when Angela Rayner turned round? Again, it sort of adds to my sort of disparagement of this frankly talentless, awful cabinet we had lumbered. I mean, for God's sakes, the people running our country in what is essentially a perma-crisis, I wouldn't even have them working on checkouts in Sainsbury's. They're utterly useless. Not saying anything bad about checkouts in Sainsbury's. I used to be a checkout girl at Safeways when it existed. But the point is, they're just so low grade. And I remember Angela Rayner saying to the people who were recording everything she said at Hansard, I want you to record all of my bad grammar because I'm working class. She didn't want the records to be amended to be grammatically correct. And I kind of think, what's that about? I mean, we're not demanding you be grammatically correct, but when it's recorded, it probably needs to be, for the same reason that worked as a solicitor and trained as a solicitor are different things.
Well, exactly. And, the record is kept and kept forever so that people can refer back to it. And those words will be examined in detail, in the future by historians who are looking at why things happened. And therefore, words are important. And he's banged himself to rights, and Keir Starmer should be turning around and saying, you've been caught out, mate, you lose your job.
I think he knows if he allows the media to pull that thread, the whole fabric of the cabinets will begin to unravel. I couldn't care less, frankly. Let it happen. Right, we are going to take a short break now. I want to know what you think about all the topics we are discussing today, because when we come back from the break, we want to hear from you. 03444 1000 is the number to dial if you want to be patched through to the studio to speak to Big Phil and I, real time on national airwaves. It's your standard network rate to do that, so well, get on with it. You can use that number to send me a WhatsApp or leave us a voice note, which we'll also vet and then put out on air. And the same way the Labour Party clearly don't vet their cabinets, we do vet your voice notes. 87222 is the text message number. Remember to write talk before your message, because that identifies where in this grand building owned by Rupert Murdoch it has to be delivered. And at talkTV is our handle on X. We're back after this.
The UK punches above their weight. It's biggest military power in Europe. It's important, right? But it's completely inadequate, and that's what we have to think about. And by the way, I'll remind the viewers that the U.S. has cut military spending for during the Biden admin. Like, they've cut 3% 3 years in a row. We really need the Europeans to understand that, this whole 2% thing is not going to work.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello there. Welcome back to the show. This is the bit of the programme where you take the floor. You become the presenter, so to speak, because what matters is what you think. So let's read out some of your messages. Morning, Alex, says Maggie in London. These judges are not woke, but leftists who, in my honest opinion, want to see the demise of this country. Wonder if he would take this boy in. That would be a no. Why do they want to see the demise of this country? That's what I don't understand. Why has it become fashionable amongst the la-di-das to bash Britain? What on earth inspired them to want to take that viewpoint? How did that cultural rot set in? Perhaps it's always been the case in Britain, I don't know. Jonathan Reynolds, someone's put in capital letters. It's a simple fact. Reynolds has lied about his qualifications and career. He publicly stated it. He knew fully well he didn't qualify, but chose to deceive and manipulate facts. This government has built its foundations on a web of lies and deceits. The electorates have been duped, and Reynolds has shown himself to lack the moral integrity we should expect. This is no different to a person claiming to be a doctor but not qualifying. They'd be struck off. We should not give MPs a different standard. They actually should be held to a higher standard. Labour hounded Boris, and this man has lied. To blame others also demonstrates his disgraceful moral compass. Fair point. well made. Good morning, Alex and Philip. Great show as always. I love Mr. Phillips' professional insight. Mr. Phillips. Hey, if you're Mr. Philip and I'm Miss Phillips, what does that make us? Professionally wed. So this is Brittany in the US, actually. She loves your insight into the law, and she loves my energetic, bubbly spirit. I don't really have it until I walk into the studios. I came in like a wet weekend. But you guys actually put a spring in my step. Now, Alex, isn't a solicitor an officer of the court, like a police officer is an officer of the court? So impersonating one is surely an offence. Well, unless you're doing it while taking off your clothes. Right. On that note, let's go over to calls and speak to Herbie, who's in Harrow. Hi, Herbie.
Yes, good morning, Alex. Well, what a morning, what a day.
Right, it's always every day's like that, isn't it? You wake up and you listen to the radio, you read the newspapers, you're like, here we go. When do I need to build an Anderson shelter?
Unbelievable. Well, Trump's definitely got this wrong. How can you blame somebody that was invaded by Putin, saying that it's his fault? Come on, it's madness. Right. Look, if we give in to Putin now, he'll control some of the minerals that we need in the world, a bit like China taking over the world by buying everything up where they can, and we'll be held to ransom yet again. Putin's a bully boy, has been a bully boy all his life, and he will carry on being a bully boy. If we give in to him now, China will say, right, we can go into Taiwan, and then North Korea will do what they want to do and everything else. We are giving in to the bullies.
Right, but don't you think that Trump gets that? I mean, surely we all get that. It's obvious, you know, the empirical evidence is there in front of you. When the tanks rolled into Ukraine, you'd imagine that Trump understands this and he's got a measure of that. And actually, he has got track record of going and breaking bread with bully boys, but he doesn't necessarily then do as they say, because when it comes to Trump's ego, he wants to be the biggest bully of them all. Now, let's talk about...
Yeah, but the thing is, though, Alex, we don't know what's going through Trump's mind at the moment. Why has he all of a sudden gone against Ukraine after all that's been going on, after all the money that's been spent? Yeah. Look, we need to defend Europe totally. We know that. I'm afraid the world has completely gone crazy with the fanatics we've now got running certain parts of the world.
All right, but, you know, you can imagine, right, and America has historically not always jumped out of the box at the first moment to run to Europe's aid. We saw this in World Wars I and II. It was only when Pearl Harbor happened they suddenly got in the game, when they had skin in it. And you cannot expect people who live on the other side of a wide ocean. And I think Donald Trump said, we're the other side of a beautiful wide ocean. Beautiful wide ocean. You've got to understand that, you know, if this was stuff going on in Mexico and El Salvador having a fisticuffs and America's like, God, this is on our doorstep, we now got migratory flows coming into our country, someone mad president of Brazil might come in and start messing about with us, Cuba, you know, whatever. Was Europe going over there and involving themselves? Well, actually, no, not really. So I think we've got to be realistic that as much as we might look to America as needing them, we've got to stand up for ourselves. Now, I want to just bring in Big Phil about the minerals argument, because what's interesting, a lot of the Europeans have said, fine, okay, we have to go in there, we get it, we got to, you know, measure up for the job and go and protect Ukraine. And at the same time, Trump's like, right, you know, the payment that we expect to have as reparations for the weapons we've already given you, which obviously he didn't sign off for, is going to be access to your minerals. That might seem cold-blooded and cold-hearted, but that's just geopolitics. That is what China, it's what most countries would do, and it's blimmin' sensible, frankly, and that is the way he's going to try and spike China's advancements, which is going to help us all, by the way. But actually, if that was part of the deal, we now get 50% access to or profits from your rare earth minerals, that actually incentivizes America to defend Ukraine. Yes. That actually means if Russia does go in there because it wants more, they're actually going up against the Americans.
Yeah, there's so many moving parts to this, and rare earth minerals are critical. You know, if you examine the world stocks for economically viable mines, China controls about 90% of the world's stocks, and some of the rare earth minerals only come from one economically viable mine. The United States has been concerned about this for some years, to the point where the United States Department of Defense has started to open up non-commercially economic mines to get access to rare earth minerals so that they can build up the stocks should there ever be a conflict and China closes down access to them. So it is a big point, and this is something where Zelensky will know that he's got a good bargaining chip here, and therefore behind closed doors, behind all this rhetoric that we're seeing, there will be some negotiations going on, and it'll be economics.
Also, you know, it's interesting actually, that whole region, a lot of the stans are very rare earth mineral rich, and so, you know, I think there has to be a message. There's got to be a way that Putin doesn't then, you know, go barging into those as well.
Well, you know, and China's taken control of most of the stans through its Belt and Road Initiative, and this is where, you know, if you listen to what J.D. Vance, the Trump's right-hand man, the deputy or vice president, that's the wording I was thinking of, vice president, you know, he said that they were looking at the threats to the southern border. Trump's threats to Panama, to Greenland, to Canada is all about the trade routes from the Pacific to the Atlantic, and Chinese influence and control in through South America. The Belt and Road Initiative is moving there. He sees China as the biggest threat. So, you know, we have to put everything into context, that's where their national focus is.
Yeah, and also I think Trump's just said, that's it, we're getting back in the big boys league. They play dirty, we're gonna play dirty too. And actually, do you know what, the world ain't nice. What is it, peace through might, the good old Reagan phrase. All right, thank you ever so much for your call, Herbie. Now, before we go to the break, oh, this is some fun breaking news. Here's an announcement, particularly for the ears and attention of Jonathan Reynolds, who was never a solicitor. The finance boss of a FTSE 250 company, the John Wood Group, never heard of them, but, you know, clearly an important company. He's quit after admitting to misstating his qualifications. Yeah, Arvind Balan resigned late on Wednesday following the incorrect description of his professional qualifications in various statements in the public domain. He had called himself a chartered accountant, a protected title, when in fact he was only a certified practicing accountant. Well, just a little fabrication there, tiny little embellishment. He said it was an honest oversight. Oh yeah, heard that one before. My decision is based on minimising distraction at this very pivotal time with our investors and lenders. Well, there you go. Rachel Reeves, Jonathan Reynolds, with, one would say, a business secretary and the Chancellor, who, as you said, these are the people who have the control over the likes of the John Wood Group, the future of the FTSE 100, 250, whatever they may be, the Bank of England, the City of London, all these corporations. Well, you know, whose domain's that in? The Business Secretary and the Chancellor. Take a leaf out of their book.
Well, and you know, this is where, you know, almost certainly someone's been doing due diligence if they're looking at investment and everything else. That due diligence found this and gone, we can't have the man at the top who's failed our due diligence tests. Well, the same should apply to government.
Yeah, absolutely, because they're top of the top of the top. Right, a short break now, but don't go anywhere, because after the break we're going to be speaking to Ben Habib, who of course was a former MEP in the Brexit Party, former deputy leader of Reform UK, now very much a bit of a political mercenary. He's going to be talking to us about asylum seekers and statements from Reform UK chairman Zia Youssef that he might not know about yet, but he's going to after this. Keep your thoughts coming in as well. The number to dial 0344499 1000. You can use that to send me a WhatsApp or leave me a voice note. Text me 87222, put talk before your message so it pings the aerials on top of Talk Towers. We're on X at talkTV, and I'm right back just after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello, welcome back to the show. Alex Phillips sitting in for the inimitable Julia Hartley-Brewer. I'm going to be with you until 1 o'clock, and same as promised tomorrow, 10 until 1. It's been wonderful having your company, your thoughts, your messages, and just knowing you are there at the other side of a laptop or a smartphone or a DAB radio. Hiya, you. It's great to have your company. Hope you're having a good day. Right, now let's welcome aboard HMS Common Sense, Ben Habib, former Brexit Party MEP. Ben, now before the break, I teased there'd been a statement by Reform UK Chairman Zia Youssef on a matter close to your heart. Ted reassures me that you have indeed seen this because you've reacted on X already. But you pushed for a long time about essentially the sort of setup of Reform UK as a limited company with shares. You said, well, this ain't right, this ain't democratic, this is not the way a political party should be established. Well, Zia Youssef has said we're pleased to announce that, as promised, Nigel Farage has handed over ownership of Reform UK to its members. Reform UK is now a non-profit with no shareholders, limited by guarantee. We're assembling the governing board in line with the Constitution. This was an important step in professionalising the party. We'll soon have more exciting announcements as Reform UK as we prepare for government. Now, you were very keen on this happening. I remember me saying to you privately, I'm pretty sure it will at some point, but everything in due course. Are you pleased or slightly annoyed that since you've gone, they've decided to do what you were pushing for?
No, not at all. I couldn't care less. This has never been about me, Alex, as I'm sure you know. I only got into politics for fear of the state of the country. And all I care about is that if reform is going to ostensibly stand for the democratic unit that is the United Kingdom and wishes the United Kingdom's government to be directed as it should be by its people. It should have the courage of its own convictions and be directed as a leadership by its membership. It stands to absolute reason, and which is why I fought the campaign that I fought. And I'm very pleased to see that Reform UK Limited, the company that Nigel effectively owned, has now been sold to a new company called Reform 2025 Limited. And that company is a company limited by guarantee and is therefore capable of being handed over to the membership, because a company limited by guarantee can be opened up to wide membership with great ease. That step hasn't yet happened. So Zia Youssef has slightly jumped the gun, but correctly, he has identified that Nigel's given up control of Reform UK Limited. Where he's gone slightly ahead of where the party is that actually the owners of Reform 2025 Limited at the moment are Nigel and him. But I imagine that in the fullness of time, they will be handing that ownership over to the membership. The other couple of crucial things that need to take place before we can be assured of the democratic deficit having been addressed is that the political party itself would have to become Reform 2025 Limited, this new company that they just set up. Because at the moment, the registered political party is still the old company. It would have to move across. And the Constitution would have to apply to this new company as well. So there are a few steps to go before I think we can say that Nigel has actually handed over control. But this is a very clear step in that direction, and I think unequivocally indicates that ownership will be transferring. Good. The Constitution to which I referred is less than brilliant. There's a very high bar that would be required to cross in order to effectively dismiss the leadership of the party. And that does put Nigel in a virtually unassailable position. Right. But I think that is something we can address again later. Well, I'm going to
play devil's advocate here, Ben, because, Reform aren't on to defend themselves. I'm not really supposed to be defending Reform UK either, as obviously an impartial broadcaster.
But you should defend Reform.
But an impartial broadcaster would actually give the right of reply. And what I can do by mixing a bit of experience from when I was involved with politics, and that was with UKIP and then, of course, Brexit Party with you as an MEP. But in those UKIP days, at the end of the tumultuous general general election. Oh my goodness. I mean, that party was constituted in exactly the way that most other parties are constituted. It had a national executive committee and all the rest of it. Now, I remember the fallout from that mad general election, the factions, the divisions, the infighting, the leadership changing every 5 seconds. I mean, first of all, Nigel was toppled when some malign characters got onto the National Executive Committee and decided they wanted him gone, despite being the only successful leader that UKIP had ever had. And that was, you know, whether one has an opinion on Nigel or not, that was borne out by facts, borne out by election results and polling. And then you just saw this ridiculous situation of the leadership changing every 5 seconds, a rotating cast of characters. It's what basically did UKIP in, ended it as a movement. It was unsalvageable, which is why Nigel walked away and set up a completely new entity with the Brexit Party, which then went on to become Reform UK. The Brexit Party was originally the thing constituted in the same way that Reform UK then took over and was set up as that limited company, because Nigel went, right, we've got to fight the reversal of Brexit. We need people elected. We need them now. You and I were among that. We got the job done. And then Nigel once again said, right, OK, hanging up my boots. And he's come back and picked up where he left off, because the Brexit Party then became Reform UK. So yes, I think one could actually also defend the fact that there was a snap election called. He had to do a lot of things 9 months ago to make sure that they would be remotely fighting fit. And now since that has happened, he's now got to do the hard work of building from the bottom up, creating branches, coming out of a manifesto, writing policies, reforming the party, reforming Reform, if you will, reconstituting it. And that seems to be going in the right direction. So that is what I would say. I would imagine, if I could get someone from Reform directly on the line now, what they might argue in reply. Just wanted to contextualise there to give it a bit of balance. Let's move on from this subject, though. And what I want to talk to you about, because it's the big story of the day, is what is going on over in America regarding Russia, regarding Ukraine. Let's have a little listen to what Donald Trump has said, some of his latest lines, and then I'll come back to you, Ben.
Modestly successful comedian, President Zelensky talked the United States of America into spending $350 billion to go into a war that basically couldn't be won. He refuses to have elections, is low in the real Ukrainian polls. I mean, how can you be high with every city is being demolished? It's hard to be high. Somebody said, oh, no, his polls are good. Give me a break. A dictator without elections. Zelensky better move fast, or he's not going to have a country left. Got to move fast, because that war is going in the wrong direction. In the meantime, we're successfully negotiating an end to the war.
Ben, I'm just going to hand the floor to you. Thoughts, please?
Well, I'm delighted, as I think any sane-minded individual should be, that there are talks taking place which will bring an end to this conflict. I can't understand the obsession of anyone with wishing to keep a war going. And I would completely agree with President Trump that this is a war that will go on and on and on unless it is brought to a close. Russia is not going to be easily defeated. The notion, as was being put about by Biden, Starmer, Macron and others, that Zelensky should be given a blank check to fight Russia in the way that he wishes to, until every Russian boot is off Ukrainian soil, was something that I can't get my head round. You know, as the West, we have done this once before, when we gave the Mujahideen, we armed up the Mujahideen in the 1980s to the teeth. And we didn't have any questions of the Mujahideen. We just put them into bat against the Russians, and understandably so. And that then, the Mujahideen turned into the Taliban. The Taliban and Al-Qaeda were given a home in Afghanistan. Al-Qaeda then took down the Twin Towers. We got Afghanistan too, and then we got Iraq and everything else.
It's an interesting comparison, Ben, because actually what I was going to ask you is whether or not you think that Zelensky is a dictator. Because if you're going to make that comparison, it's sort of suggesting, given Zelensky the blank check to arm and, you know, the weapons to go and fight Russia, that, you know, give him too much power and he could become a little monster.
I think if you give any individual, any foreign power too much power, they become a monster. You know, we've done the same with China. You're going to be looking at me thinking, why the hell am I bringing China into this debate? But on the altar of free trade, we have bought lots of giant Chinese tat over the last 25 years. We've enriched China as a result. And China now is a geopolitically powerful country.
I'm going to bring in Big Phil here, because I'm rather sceptical at the idea that Zelensky's going to come out the other side of this and start becoming an imperialist, dictator.
I haven't, Alex, you're putting words in my mouth. I haven't said he's going to come out as an imperialist dictator. What I was going to say was that you don't arm up foreign powers using your own money without thinking of that which is in the interests of your own country. And in the case of the United States of America, they spent $350 billion on this conflict. They have a right to have an influence on how this conflict is conducted. And they have a right to make sure that the money that they're spending on behalf of their people, is actually spent with the interests of America at heart. And the same goes for the United Kingdom. We've spent the thick end of 20 billion quid on this action. And it's not good enough for any democratically elected Western government to say Zelensky's got a blank check.
Right.
They have to assess what is in our interests. We haven't done that.
No,
and Trump is doing that.
We should cynically go after our own slice of the pie, I would suggest. You don't just give money and go, here you go, have that. So interesting, Big Phil, there's a suggestion, or not just a suggestion, it has been said that Doge has got access to the Pentagon. The Doge AI machine is going to roll into this foreign spending into Ukraine and find out where it has gone. There have been all sorts of things sort of spoken at sidelines, that Ukrainian weapons have turned up in very interesting places where perhaps they've been sold on to people they shouldn't have been. Do you think the doging of Ukraine is going to reveal some stuff that we go, oh my goodness, wow?
Well, when you get these sorts of amounts of money put around, and you get your weapons being bought from here, there and everywhere by your dodgy dealers, because that's the only way that you can get them, bought by legitimate governments for good reasons, then yes, there are going to be horrors that are going to turn up. But I think when Doge gets into US intelligence and the US Department of Defense, I think that's the reason why Donald Trump has put effective political lightweights in charge of those departments, because they're two of the biggest spenders. They won't have the political nous to stand up to the Doge team and defend their departments, and they'll be quite happy for the efficiencies to be found. And there's massive efficiencies to be found.
And I love the fact that doging's just slipped right into the sort of modern day English vernacular. I think it's probably going to end up in the Oxford English Dictionary at some point. Ben, before I let you go, I just want to sort of wind you up and let you loose talking about the latest ridiculous judgments when it comes to asylum seekers. First of all, you got the one who said he was 23 years old, and some Hugo Norton something or the other agreed with it, despite the fact he had a receding hairline, a massive beard and a wrinkly forehead. And then another ruling that jailing a Syrian sex offender, who was also an asylum seeker, of course, could breach his human rights. Ben, just go for it.
Yeah, so, let's just link this into the discussion we've just been having on Ukraine. Here we are in the United Kingdom and most of Western Europe and the United States under Biden, writing blank checks for Zelensky to protect his borders and protect his people. And at the same time, Western civilization, as it were, has taken down its borders and let in any number of people that are antipathetic to us, our values, our culture, our history, our way of life, etc. And we have embodied into law these sort of universal human rights that come from the convention, and we've done it in the Human Rights Act in 1998. And through that convention, we have set aside the the correct democratic right of British people to have their citizenship promoted over and above those who've come to this country. And instead, we are requiring our civil society to be put at risk by those coming here through this false notion that their human rights are sacrosanct and, if necessary, to the damage of our own people. If someone is committed of paedophilia, I think it was a Pakistani gentleman a couple of weeks ago who was convicted of paedophilia but wouldn't be deported to Pakistan because he has a right to family life in the UK. What about the family life of the children who've been abused?
Right.
It's absolutely ludicrous. And I think there was a case of an Albanian who wouldn't be deported because his son didn't like chicken nuggets in Albania. Yeah. The thing is that we've gone mad in the West, and I hope that part of this challenging of the liberal global order, and I see the end of the Ukraine war as part of that, I hope part of that will also be a reconnection of our governing class with the need for borders, in both the sense of protecting us from illegal migration, but also preventing legal migration.
Right.
We've got to just get a grip.
Got to get a grip. Well, this is it. Actually, that just sums it up, doesn't it? Let us hope that all of this is one big process of grip getting. Ben Habib, former Brexit Party MEP, fantastic having you on the programme. Going to take an advert break now, but when we come back, we're going to be speaking to a former Director of Communications at Number 10 of how he would suggest the government deal with some of these little fibbers sitting in the cabinet. Don't go anywhere. Back after this.
Trump is being classic Trump when he says to Zelensky, you started it. I don't think he did, to be fair.
Yeah, I mean, they're
pushing it a bit there. But if talking must be good, surely. Aiming for peace is better than endlessly fighting that grotesque war in which hundreds of thousands of young men are dying in horrific circumstances day after day.
This is Talk. Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello there. Welcome back. This is Alex Phillips sitting in for Julia Hartley-Brewer. I'm with you until 1 o'clock. Now, let's get back into this story of this, well, it seems like a pretty pervasive habit among Labour members of the Cabinet to somewhat embellish their CVs, to sort of trump up their qualifications and pretend that they've been bigwigs in their professional careers, or unprofessional, as the case might be of Jonathan Reynolds, because after claiming he was a solicitor in Parliament, well, turns out he hadn't yet passed all the exams and got that particular badge of honour, so a professional he was not. Shall we have a listen? He's claimed that, someone else wrote that CV. Who else writes someone else's CV? Buck passing of the highest order. But unfortunately, poor old Jonathan had stood up in Parliament and actually said this.
Before the last election, I worked as a solicitor in Manchester city centre, and I would travel in to Manchester every day from what is now my constituency.
But you didn't do, did you? You might have been training as a solicitor, working in order to become a solicitor, but you weren't working as a solicitor, were you? And of course you have Rachel Reeves, who has basically made up all sorts of gubbins about being an economist and how long she spent somewhere, and then apparently was getting bits and bobs of expenses, or quite a lot of them actually, to pay to buy presents for her bosses. Then, of course, let's not forget, how could we, Spexgate and the massive, ever-supplying wardrobe of Lord Ali, the Taylor Swift tickets as well. I mean, it's just been one little fib, one little embellishment, one after the other. Frankly, it brought down Boris Johnson, but are the Labour Party right in just saying nothing to see here, business as usual? Let's speak to former Director of Communications at Number 10, Jonathan Haslam. Jonathan, great to have you on the programme. I mean, is this just the sort of, rough and tumble of politics, that your enemies are going to be trying to scoop out stuff on you, they're going to put it into the press to embarrass you, and you've just got to put your fingers in your ears and carry on as if nothing's happened. When it's a tipping point that you suddenly go, this is making us look like fools and it's basically ruining public trust in us, certainly Starmer not polling brilliantly, where do you put that on the sliding spectrum if you were saying to a Prime Minister you're going to get rid of them or ignore it?
I think as far as, and good morning to you, Alex, I think as far as Rachel Reeves is concerned, then he is absolutely shackled to her for the time being until it becomes absolutely impossible to see her carrying on as the Chancellor of the Exchequer. So they've ridden out the worst of what we have to hear about her slightly embellished CV. When it comes to Jonathan Reynolds, I think it moves into a slightly different category, not getting rid of, but it's because it's a professional qualification that he is allowed to become exaggerated. And that's a bit of a problem, particularly if he says something in the House of Commons. Language is extraordinarily important, and I would have thought that, yes, you hold on to him, but clearing the ground would say perhaps an explanation to the House of Commons, an apology for misunderstandings, if any, were taken. You notice the great words, if any. How many apologies, Alex, do we see? Would you presage with the, if I've caused any offence, when you know that's a
right,
so there are ways around it. I think Reynolds is a bit different because he's talking about a professional qualification, and that's difficult. You can smooth it over. There is a wider problem that politicians really do need to pay attention to the whole of their CVs. As you rightly said, you can't just outsource writing your CV. Please go read what somebody says you've actually achieved. And Starmer's got to be wary about one fact. It's not the one killer thing that happens that ruins governments. It's the drip, drip, drip of the effect, again, as you mentioned earlier on, that damages trust within political life more generally. And he needs to be saying to all his colleagues, for God's sake, look at your CVs, make sure you're squeaky clean. I don't want any more of these because the pressure is too great. It's no good for us and the project we're trying to achieve.
You said that Starmer is shackled to Rachel Reeves. I mean, certainly publicly he seems to be, but why should that be the case? Because I would think, given how disastrous his current polling is, given how unpopular some elements of that budget have been, winter fuel allowances, farmers and inheritance tax, which aren't necessarily worth a massive amount of money, that Starmer could begin to regain some control and regain some respect by having a cabinet reshuffle, being the hero of the hour, and frankly throwing her under the bus. I mean, why should he not do that?
It's difficult for him because it's not just Rachel Reeves who decided that they were going to get rid of the winter fuel allowance or impose inheritance tax on farmers. So Starmer himself was complicit in this, and at the moment, getting rid of a chancellor says, I've got it wrong as well. And you need to have some sort of political distance between yourself if you're going to throw someone under the bus. I don't think he's got that at the moment. If the policies that she has recommended to him are seen continuing to fail, and let's face it, it goes back to well before the run-up to the election when they made stupid decisions about tying themselves to refusing tax increases, when everybody from the IFS to the Office of Budget Responsibility were told them that their financial calculations were nonsense. Then that's a problem. You might find a time when the pressure becomes too great and the policies that Rachel Reeves are espousing just says there has to be a breaking. Who knows? It might be defence, when we all know in this country sacrifices are going to have to be made. They'll have to be made by pensioners like me, perhaps, and others. And we need to spend more on defence. And let me just put it out right there up front. I have a son who's an army officer, so I feel strongly about this. But if Rachel Reeves dug her heel in and said, sorry, Keir, I'll go to 2.4, but no more, then I'm afraid that's the parting of the ways.
But any government can move things around and make excuses to do U-turns. And frankly, do you know, I've got to the stage now that when it comes to political U-turns, good, you can make a bad policy, realise it's a bad policy in retrospect, and bin it. That's exactly what a government should do. If the people turn around and go, oh my gosh, this is going to affect us very negatively, far better to admit your mistake and get it gone. Or if you're not mistaken, then fine, stick it out. And when it comes to, I think, the winter fuel allowance that probably needs looking at again, and certainly when it comes to the approach to farmers, that definitely needs looking at again. And they managed to sort of say, oh, well, do you know what? Borrowing costs aren't as bad as we thought it was. Well, we got this extra little pocket of money. Governments are able to do that if they really wanted to. I am certain of it. But what do you think about his handling, Starmer turning around, before we've got any outcome of, any conclusions coming from talks between America and Russia, to basically sort of verbally, with your son being in the army, verbally commit troops to what could potentially be something like a demilitarized zone in Ukraine? Are you like, great, brilliant, that's affirmative action, that's the UK actually saying it's got a significant role to play on the international stage? Or are you saying, hang on a minute, we don't even know what our soldiers might be going to. Why are you saying these things?
Well, I think you have to give us something of a lead, because Europe's short of leaders at the moment. Let's leave aside the European Union. Europe as an entity needs to be protected against a revanchist Russian regime. And there's no doubt that they will push further. And once they have tried, unless there are security guarantees, once they have got something sorted in Ukraine, they will certainly continue the pressure on Transnistria and other places which are weaknesses, and they will continue to probe. If concertedly Europe and foreign soldiers on Ukrainian ground causes Putin to rethink, then that's important. What we're seeing at the moment, though, is that clash of ideologies, which says, I just want peace, almost peace at any time, and I can say it. And then there are all the interconnecting bits, and Europe has a good hand to play in many parts of that. So does Zelensky, if he has a slightly thicker skin. He should never have said no to Donald Trump over mineral resources, for example. The negotiation that you can have, and I'll be delighted to do it with you, because we respect what the United States has done for us. And also remind him of the fact that actually, if Ukraine goes, that's the breadbasket of Europe.
Yeah.
A huge breadbasket now in the hands of Vladimir Putin.
Right.
If Ukraine goes, that's all the mineral resources in the hands of Vladimir Putin.
Yeah.
And out that the United States spent 35 years with the Cold War and longer trying to dismember, now could see itself resurge. And it's another superpower, and that's another problem when you face up to China. There are so many connecting bits here.
Right.
Yes, you can look at it in a simplistic way, Alex.
Bad guys, good guys, you get back in your box. Nothing simplistic in the world of geopolitics. And I think actually the problem of the European leaders and very much our own leadership is it does go for these dumbed down tropes all too often. And that's what's given us such weakness. We haven't played a canny game for a long time. Jonathan Haslam, former Director of Communications at Number 10, thank you ever so much. We don't have long before we have to shuffle off to the top of the hour break. It's a hard out, as they say in the business. But Jonathan makes a very good point. It is about that strategy and what Putin gets strategically in that area.
Yeah, very much so. And we'll have to remember that for years and through Donald Trump's first presidency, Russia has always been up there as one of the number one enemies. And this $350 billion, it's a small fraction of US defense budget, putting effectively an enemy of the US in a position where they can't do anything in a very cost-effective way.
Well, fingers crossed. Now, interestingly, after the break, we're going to be speaking to, recently knighted actually, Sir Bill Browder. Now, he is basically Putin's number one foreign enemy, head of the global Magnitsky Justice Campaign. He, of course, went up against the kleptocracy of Russia and sort of, well, as a man with a crosshairs on his head, one could say. It'd be interesting to hear his views on whether he thinks this is appeasement of a tyrant or actually the best way to play a man with Putin's mindset. We're going to be discussing that after this break. Whack the kettle on. Don't go anywhere. I will see you just after this.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, welcome back to the show. Alex Phillips with you for just another hour, joined by Big Phil, of course. You've been a pleasure so far today. We're having fun. The time's flying by, actually.
It goes by very quickly indeed.
Yeah, it does. It wasn't as quick the last few days. It must be your presence that makes it ever more joyful.
Of course.
Or perhaps it's so awful I'm just running towards the finish line faster than normal. No, it's been gorgeous having you here. And we are going to be sticking with geopolitics, which is definitely the expertise of Philip Ingram and definitely the expertise as well of our next guest, Sir Bill Browder, recently knighted, and rightly so. Putin's #1 foreign enemy, a man who essentially has the Kremlin's crosshairs on his head but has never been silenced as a result. Bill, welcome to the programme. Sir Bill, I should say. And congratulations.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Now, we have been chewing over what on earth is going on geopolitically. We're of the opinion it's easy enough to play armchair commentator, but how this all sort of washes out in the long run is what's most important. But certainly Europe put on the back foot, surprised, agog perhaps with some of Trump's comments, and very fearful that this is appeasement to Putin. Could it actually be stroking the ego of a monster, which is a necessary way of somehow containing Russia? I mean, what's your view on this? Because you've got a good grip on Putin's personality, but you're also not going to want anyone cozying up to him.
Well, I've spent 15 years in conflict with Vladimir Putin. After my lawyer, Sergei Magnitsky, was murdered for uncovering a corruption scheme in which Putin was a beneficiary, Putin has been chasing me around the world with death threats, kidnapping threats, extradition requests, Interpol red notices, etc. So I know this guy very well. I know what he responds to. I know what energizes him. I know what scares him. And what I can tell you, and this is not just me saying this, but anybody else who's been in my position, is that Putin looks for weakness. He looks for weakness, and he tries to take advantage of it. And we've seen, for example, I think 4 previous presidents were all trying to stroke his ego and, quote, reset relations with him. And that started with George Bush. Remember that he looked in Putin's eyes and saw his soul. And then there was the Obama reset. And then Trump won. He said Putin's a good guy. And then Biden said he just wants to create a predictable environment for Putin. All these guys showed weakness, and Putin took advantage of that. The one thing that Putin understands and responds well to is strength. And when I say strength, when he sees someone pushing back and pushing back hard. And that's what he responds to. And if you want to have a negotiation with a guy like Putin, who's a mass murderer, a tyrant, and a dictator, you got to push back hard. And so any thought that you want to go in and stroke his ego is just the absolutely exact opposite of what you want to do to get Putin to agree to terms that might be satisfactory for us and for Ukraine.
So what's going on here, right? Because first of all, yes, Donald Trump wants to be the big I am in terms of being the person who goes down in history of creating peace. But frankly, if you appease Putin, that is not going to be what you go down in history for. But you would imagine there'll be plenty of people sitting around Donald Trump going, look, these are the facts on the table. It's not difficult to see how malign Putin is as a leader, how appeasement has gone in the past. And Donald Trump wants to be, the cock of the walk when it comes to geopolitics. He wants to be top dog. He's normally the sort of man to give someone a serious tongue lashing, as he's doing to Zelensky. So why is he all of a sudden thinking that he's actually doing the correct strategy by going after Zelensky and what seems to be echoing the Kremlin's lines? I mean, could it be true there's compromise? Is this a more complex game? To me, there's something here that seems missing, unless it's just the stark, raving obvious that actually Trump does love Putin, and that's that. I mean, I don't want that to be true. I desperately hope that that is not true. And so I'm more willing to sort of build out the idea that there could be a broader, more sensible geopolitical strategy here. But I want your take on that. Why is Trump doing what he's doing? Obviously, you're not in his head, but take an educated guess.
Well, I mean, we've been down this road before. I mean, this is not the first time we talked about Trump and Russia. I was when Trump met with Putin at the Helsinki summit in 2018, at the press conference afterwards, one of Putin's requests was for Trump to hand me over to Putin. And Trump's response, I think that's a great idea. And so, I mean, there's been this stuff going on between Trump and Putin and Russia for a long time. And you know, all the people around Trump have always said, oh my God, this is the Russian hoax and this is the Trump derangement syndrome. Well, here we are today. Trump has you know, pretty much thrown his lot in with Putin against Zelensky. And I don't think it's even productive to try to figure out why he's doing it. I think we need to figure out what we do in response, because that's going to determine whether we're all sort of, you know, reporting, you know, whether we're all becoming slaves to Putin, whether he makes up us into nuclear dust or whatever it is. I mean, we have to come up with a response. It doesn't really matter what's motivating Trump at this point. What matters is how we deal with it here in the UK, how the Europeans deal with it, and how we protect Ukraine so that Putin doesn't end up, you know, banging into Poland and Estonia and Latvia and Lithuania. That's what we have to worry about.
I have to wonder, actually, thoughts just popped into my head. What his late wife and current wife would have to say about Putin, whether or not they're sort of, because they're from, you know, essentially the USSR, aren't they? And whether or not that they say to him at night time, oh, things were great under Russia, and he's a bit of a Russophile. I hadn't really made that connection myself before. No one really wants to know what Trump's pillow talk is, though. But I want to bring you in and let's all talk together. Let's get Philip Ingram in on this as well. I mean, Bill's got a point, doesn't he? Actually, this is what Europe needs to be doing. It has been a wake-up call for Europe. Europe has been abysmal in having any sort of coordinated plan. We just look like a nonsense basket case continent most of the time. And the strong men, the big voices in Europe who are sort of more bold and follow things through, actually do tend to be Russian sympathisers. We said this earlier. It's the Orbans of this world who have just said, I have no truck with anyone telling me what to do, and I like Putin. Herein lies a problem.
Yeah, it's those countries where there's a more dictatorial approach, even if they are labelled democracies, and they're the ones that seem to align themselves to Trump-like characters, and Putin is a Trump-like character, or is Trump a Putin-like character? And Trump is so much more complex. He approaches things from a business perspective, not a political perspective. He's a bully, and there's always a deal that he's trying to do somewhere with US interests, and his interest therefore within that. And we don't have enough information at the minute to know how he's playing this, but he's playing a very dangerous game with Putin.
Well, yeah, bullies tend to like other bullies. They graduate towards other bullies in the playground, don't they? Bill, what should Europe's response be? I say that with, I wait with bated breath, because we've already seen Starmer said, right, we're in there, we're going to be part of a demilitarised zone and send troops, potentially. And then Olaf Scholz walking out of the meeting early and doing what you expect Germany to do, which is the some part of naff all. And Germany is the biggest economy, frankly, in Europe, has been potentially the weakest over all of this when it comes to gas pipelines, when it comes to applying sanctions, when it comes to the reuse of German-sold weaponry. So what does Europe do? Because I can't see any moment in the future of actually that lot getting their act together.
Well, actually, I wouldn't be so pessimistic. I was just at the Munich Security Conference on the weekend, and I had an opportunity to meet with 7 foreign ministers from 7 European countries, and we're in a new world today. And this was before, I should say, all the Trump comments in the last 48 hours. But we're in a new world than we were, before Trump was president. And there's one thing we can do, which is dramatic and could change the entire conversation, which is that putting aside all the rhetoric and all the nonsense and all the tweets and all this kind of stuff, at the end of the day, what is Trump's leverage in this negotiation? And the simple answer is that the United States provides half of the financial military aid for Ukraine. And if the United States cuts that off, Ukraine will, not right away, but in 6 months or 9 months, run out of ammunition. Putin will overtake Ukraine, and therefore he's putting Ukraine in a situation where they're sort of beginning to be forced to accept a surrender. So how do we get around that? Well, there's a very interesting thing that happened about a week after the war started. $300 billion of Russian central bank reserves were frozen. That money has been frozen. About 12 or 13 billion is held in the United States. The rest is held in Europe or here. And that money, if this is all about financial military aid for Ukraine, we could confiscate that money. When I say we, I mean us here in the UK and the European Union, And then we could provide that money to the Ukrainians so they could continue to fight for another day, and so they could then decide at what point and how they want to negotiate, as opposed to being forced into a surrender.
So this is my problem, because I know about the 300 billion, and a lot of it I think is in Belgium. It's so blimmin' obvious, right, that this is money that was confiscated from Russia and it's been frozen, and actually, you know, Ukraine needs money. Europe is largely rather strapped for cash. It's been in economic decline for the most part of a decade or two. So why is that not being done? This is my big problem. You said, you know, you're being optimistic, you've spoken to those foreign ministers, the game has changed, but it's always, I kind of think it's all shoulda, woulda, coulda. You know, the prevarication at the start of this invasion led to problems. It's going to be, even with all the will in the world, trying to unfreeze those assets and getting people to sit around and agree to it is going to be like pulling teeth, isn't it?
Well, it will be, and you're right to be skeptical, because you have this problem where you have 27 EU member states that have to agree to it, and Hungary will veto it. And actually, even worse than that, Hungary, all EU member states every 6 months have to reapprove the sanctions package, and I think that Hungary will veto the sanctions package in the summer, in which case the 200 billion that's held in Europe will then go back to the Russians. And so we have 6 months to get this done. It's not going to be done at an EU level. It's going to have to be done at a coalition of the willing level. Belgium has most of the money, as you mentioned. It's 200 billion. And what I think needs to be done, and it could be done very quickly and very easily if there was enough sort of functionality of these people, is for Belgium to confiscate the money, and for the 25 of 27 EU member states to provide a sort of joint guarantee if there's a problem, if there's a legal claim, that everyone will fight it together, and then off to the races. And you're right to be skeptical based on the past performance of the Europeans, but I can tell you that everybody, you know, as much as we're having this conversation right now, the heads of state of every European country is having this conversation, because if Ukraine is forced into a capitulation, into a surrender, we're going to end up with like 15 or 20 million Ukrainian refugees fanning out across Europe and the UK. We're going to end up with Putin making a move on Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland. And we may be in a situation where that happens without NATO, because the United States, I think, is a very high likelihood, based on all the body language and words coming out of the United States, that Trump will withdraw U.S. troops from Eastern Europe. And so we're in an emergency situation. And what I told people in Munich was, you know, there's like 18 different conversations going on. This should be the only conversation going on right now, because this can change the outcome of this entire crisis. This money, confiscating it, giving it to Ukraine, and allowing them the time and the resources to fight until they're ready to negotiate.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't understand the mechanics of any of this. You know, what bank is it in, and can Belgium just go along with their, you know, visa and go, oh, right, there you go, that's out, let's buy some weapons? I'm sure it isn't that easy. But you know, I'm going to bring Phil into this. Like, why? Why is this not being done? Why has it not been done? Belgium, of all people, they are the headquarters of NATO. That is where NATO sits. This is surely in the interests of NATO. Belgium is also the house of the European Union, the European Parliament, which I sat in myself, so I know how ridiculous that, you know, that venture is, quite frankly, when it comes to not agreeing on anything. But it would be deeply symbolic. Why the lack of conviction?
Because Europe has traditionally never been able to make a decision about anything, and they will debate lots of stuff, but never actually finally say, the simplest thing to do is this, and then go and do it. You know, if you could placate Trump very, very easily by confiscating that Russian money, giving it to Ukraine, and telling Ukraine to buy US weapons with it, Trump would then go, oh, hey, brilliant, business. Hey, we've got that business.
So what can Belgium do this unilaterally? Could Belgium just go, we've got 200 billion and we're going to make this decision?
I'm not a lawyer who understands
that sort of Phil, do you understand that?
The answer is yes. Yes, Belgium can do it. There's a legal case for doing it. Many excellent international lawyers have made the case. And by the way, the case has already been made so successfully that the EU has agreed to confiscate the interest on this money. So we've already crossed the Rubicon. We're going to take the interest on the money. And it was just sort of a negotiation with themselves not to take the principal. Right. And so, I mean, and I don't think we're that far off of this based on world events, based on the previous conversations. I mean, it's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer. And this does change the entire negotiation. all of a sudden, Ukraine has a seat at the table, Europe has a seat at the table, and Trump loses his leverage because his leverage is only the continued U.S. military aid. And as you just said, it's a win-win for Trump. I mean, all of his, if the U.S. gets a $150 billion defense contract order, he's not going to turn that down.
No.
So he gets his money, Ukraine gets its sovereignty, Europe gets its security, and Putin doesn't get anything. And that should be the thing we do.
Bill, it's been fantastic having you. Oh, yeah. Bill, Phil, all of you.
I was going to say that could be what Trump is, the tactics that he's building up to. And of course, if Putin is allowed to win, there'll be a new Cold War. During the Cold War, we were spending 6 to 7% of GDP on defence. We're on a path to have to do that now.
Yeah. Well, thank you to Sir Bill Browder, and congratulations once again on that night. It is always a pleasure and an honour getting someone of Bill Browder's courage and calibre on this programme. I mean, what a dude. Right, we're going to take a short break now. What are your thoughts on the lot of this? Just before we go to break, Tim Montgomery, who often comes and sits as my comfort creature, the other side of the studio there, famously set up Conservative Home, that website, served in number 10 himself for a while, and then quite extraordinarily left the Conservative Party and said, I've had enough of them, I am with Reform. Now, he has put out a tweet. I'm just going to use this to sort of get the juices going in your head sitting at home. He said that Reform's silence on Trump and Ukraine must end, and end urgently. Nigel Farage has invested a great deal in his relationship with Trump, and so many issues, from immigration, tax, net zero and trans on the domestic front to a more hawkish approach to China and Iran on the global stage. There was good reason to do so, but the last few days have changed everything. Essentially, what he wants Nigel to do is come out and put his cards on the table. Now, Nigel, of course, is at CPAC, which is possibly an opportunity for him to do just that in a speech later tonight. So have a think about that. If you want to comment on that, let me know. If you want to comment on anything, the state of those judges, throw in your 2-bit on that. Jonathan Reynolds and the ongoing lying, the fibbing, the embellishments of the Labour Party. Really, what do we need to do about Ukraine and Russia? Could this be clever tactical manoeuvres by Trump, or is this basically sort of a Russophilia that Trump is exhibiting? Let me know your thoughts on the lot of it. The number to dial 03444 99 1000. That's charged at your standard network rate. You can use that to send me a WhatsApp, or indeed leave me a voice note. 8722 is the number to text. Put talk in front of your message, and we're on X at talkTV. I am back just after this, and I can't wait to hear from you.
Well, no, I think it is in the national interest to stand up to Putin's aggression.
Yeah, but for how long, though?
He won't stop in the Ukraine. Well, but the point is they're holding the line in Ukraine.
Not really.
So
they've already lost a load of ground. I remember talking to Rear Admiral Chris Parry, who's a very estimable character, used to be NATO commander, and he's basically said the game's up. He said there's nothing really that Ukraine can do unless you want to go in there with a NATO force, which of course we don't want to do.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, welcome back to the show. Alex Phillips with you for, oh my gosh, big film. We've only got about 40 minutes left. Hasn't the time flied?
Yeah, well, we'll just stay. We'll just stay.
Yeah. Okay, I'm up for doing a multi-shift today, actually. I'm really getting stuck into it. Shall we speak now to Paul, who is in Tyneside. Hi there, Paul.
Doing?
Hi, Paul.
Hiya.
Hi. Right, come on, you're on air. What do you want to talk about?
All right, so it's just with regards to Europe and NATO stepping up. I think on a whole, I think it would be wise, and I think it should happen that NATO and Europe steps up. Not necessarily to push Russia back or to do anything like that, but to certainly discourage Russia from taking any further action. You've got Finland, which is worrying a bit. You've got Belarus, which has got a lot of military capability now. It's been reinforced by Russia some more, so that's putting Poland and the north of Ukraine under pressure. And I think if Europe steps up, and I think it's right what Trump's doing, to be honest, expecting us to do that, because we are not his continent. We are his allies, but we're not his continent. And that allows him and the USA to do bigger things. And I think on the world stage, America is the only nationality which has got the capability to project its might, and enforce.
Right, but this is the frustrating thing, isn't it, Paul? America's got a population of give or take 350 million. It's got a far more sort of matured and united industrial military complex, I would imagine. But when you look at the combined populations of the European members of NATO, which was basically the EU member states of old, when we used to be part of it, we have combined populations of 500 million people. In many respects, as a combined entity, the European forces of NATO should far outnumber America capabilities. And also we've got Turkey, and Turkey from time to time isn't against shooting down some Russian planes. Funny geezer though, Erdogan, always got his own sort of tactics to play. So I mean, this is the frustration, isn't it, Phil? The fact that Europe should and could, on paper, be able, as a united whole, to stand up to an ailing, weakened Russia.
Very much so. For too many years, Europe has relied on the United States to provide that backstop, and more than the backstop, the underpinning of national defence for European countries. That's allowed European countries to take some of the taxpayers' money that they should have invested in defence and do it for other things that have been competition to the States. That's why Trump is angry at it. We've still got Spain and Italy that are not even spending 2% of GDP on defence, and they're NATO members.
Right.
It's a requirement as a NATO member to spend minimum of 2% GDP on defence. And this is the reality we're working in. And I think the big positive out of this is Trump is forcing European leaders to step up and actually take responsibility for their own security. And that can only be a good thing for all of us.
Yeah, and actually one of the things that I think Russia's invasion of Ukraine has done is bring in, I mean, you mentioned there Finland, Paul, it's brought in those Scandinavian countries into NATO, and you don't mess with the Finns, blimmin' heck, I've seen what they do on their national service. Oh, that's it, from the age of about 16, you're carrying logs through ice floes and things like that. Mad people, the Finns. I'd have them on my team any day of the week. Paul, thank you ever so much. Let's speak now to Georgina, who's in London. Hi, Georgina.
Good morning. Thank you for having me on the show. I just want to ring about Jonathan Reynolds.
Oh, yeah.
Blatantly lied on his CV regarding his job application for Secretary of State by saying he's a qualified solicitor when he isn't. I mean, there is a law passed in 1974 saying it's to say you are a solicitor when you're not. You know, it's the equivalent of someone going into hospital for heart surgery, very delicate operation, as you know, thinking you're having a top surgeon operating on you and finding out after the fact that it was a trainee.
Yeah. Do you know, I'm with you on this, and do you know, this sort of thing sort of sticks in my craw slightly as a journalist, because I am indeed a journalist. I went to journalism school. I went to one of the best journalism schools in the land, actually, and I've got to, you know, if I wanted to be a bonehead about it, I could stick some acronyms after my name, BJTC and all the rest of it, to prove my credentials as a properly trained journalist. And to go through that, you actually have to understand libel, you have to understand media law, you have to understand public administration, and actually the way that everything works, from the passage of a bill through Parliament to the structure of the European Union and all the rest of it. And when you understand these delicacies, that gives you the position of being able to say, look, I'm a voice of authority because I know how to balance, I know the rules of the game, and I'm going to play by them. And when people turn around who've just literally done a tweet and call themselves a journalist, I'm like, can you stop, please? Say what you like, I'm all about free speech, but don't say you're something that you're not. So that really does stick in my craw. But there's a lot of it going on these days. And I do think, actually, what's interesting is the fact that actually it's the sort of the legal, was it the Solicitors Association, the professional body of solicitors have come out and said about Reynolds, you can't do this. So they've taken action. But when we were speaking earlier to a former number 10 advisor, Phil, he was sort of saying, look, they you know, ride it out, essentially. If the government does do what, I mean, I just like games. I just want, you know, to start chipping away at that cabinet because they were useless. And Starmer needs to be, you know, have a taste of his own medicine. But the thing is with this, when you allow one or two people to be got, it opens the door for this to just become havoc. And this is what happened in the Conservative Party. Yeah. Constantly people being forced to step down, forced to resign. Yeah. And we then end up with, look, as much as I don't like Labour, what I like even less is when you just end up with a sort of ungovernable faction-fighting mess who are doing that instead of running the country.
But the trouble is, Starmer, you know, in the run-up to the election, told the British electorate that he was going to be this beacon of truth and beacon of everything, you know, keeping the, you know, the morals of politics pure, and he's been proven wrong. And you know, his cabinet ministers at the most senior level, you know, the Chancellor, have been proven wrong. You know, something needs to happen. You can't just ignore it and let it sit there, because what message does that send to everyone else?
Yeah, no, maybe a sort of public slap across the wrist, if not more. Georgina, thank you ever so much for your call. Now, before we go to break, is your opportunity to find out how you could get 25 big ones in the back pocket to fend off the worst of Rachel Reeves. This is it.
It's competition time, and we're giving you a chance to win a whopping £25,000. So what do you need to do to get involved? All you have to do is text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post. It's as simple as that. Once again, to get involved, just text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post.
18 plus, UK excluding NI. Enter by SMS for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on March the 3rd, 2025. Or send your name, email and contact number to £25,000 cash competition, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on March the 6th, 2025. This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
Oh, there you go. Good luck if you have indeed entered that competition. And if you happen to be the lucky winner, you know I like a pint of cider. Right, we're going to take a short break now, but when I come back, I'm going to be joined by a man that I absolutely adore. We used to work together at the channel that must not be named. It is the wonderful economist and journalist Liam Halligan. He's up with us after this.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very, very good, very good. We were just talking about, people speaking out of their rear ends, and Ted just said to me, "Is that not what you do?" And I said, "No, I shout out of it." And then Phil said, "Isn't that what one calls a trump?" Very good, funny. Like I said, there should be like a subscribers only, press the red button and get the advert chat. It's a winning moment. Right, let's enter into a conversation with Liam Halligan, economist and journalist, a brilliant man indeed. I consider him a very good friend, the wonderful Liam. Hi Liam, how are you doing?
Hi Alex, nice to see you.
Oh, lovely to see you, my gorgeousness. Right, now, what isn't gorgeous is the state of our economy. Normally a subject that makes me nod off, but when you put it all down and explain it to me, I go, wow, I get it now. So let's work through this. The Work and Pension Secretary is battling the Treasury over $5 billion in welfare cuts. That's being planned by ministers. They need to make savings. Obviously, I think we can all see that our welfare budget is massively overinflated. Way too many people not working and just sitting at home on universal credit. And, should we be surprised that the Work and Pension Secretary, who, the axe is going to fall on their department in order to carry this out, doesn't want it happening? But it's got to, hasn't it, really?
This is a perennial battle in Whitehall. It's not just a Labour Party thing, it's a Tory Party thing. The Treasury is forever clamping down on the Department for Work and Pensions because, of course, the welfare bill is the biggest bill faced by any government in history. It's always the part of the budget where the Treasury tries to save money. And $5 billion, we're not talking about, let's be clear, we're not talking about actually lowering the amount of money spent. We're talking about slowing down the rate of projected increases in the welfare bill. The only person who's managed to do that in my lifetime is Peter Lilly under the Thatcher government when he was, and then Major. That those Tory governments did manage to just about slow down the rate of growth of the welfare bill. But look, this is massive. I feel sorry for Liz Kendall. I think she is the best among the best of a bad bunch. I think the Labour front bench is woefully short of grit and intellect and calibre. It's nothing like the Blair front bench, which had some actually very seasoned politicians in it, people, properly clever people. I didn't always agree with what they wanted to do, but you had to respect the way they went about doing it and getting things done. Very little talent on Starmer's front bench. I think the mediocrity starts from the top and then goes down. I do think Liz Kendall, the Work and Pension Secretary, is made of better stuff than most of her colleagues. She has talked and been courageous in talking and wound up the left of her party in talking about trying to clamp down on sickness benefit. Now, you said some kind words about me without making this as kind of loving. A journalist I admire is Fraser Nelson, formerly editor of The Spectator. He's been writing some really good stuff on the sickness benefit bill. There are now 2,000 people a day being signed off sick. It's headed for 100 billion quid. We are consigning vast swathes of our population, particularly young people, to sickness benefit ghetto, if you like, forever. So, but Liz has talked a good game on this, but when it actually comes to the cuts, obviously it's much, much harder to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because when you actually draw down into the statistics on this, the boomers aren't the ones who are now leaving work early and saying they're sick. The biggest cohort is actually 18 to 25-year-olds who discernibly probably don't have physical ailments. This is quite literally all in their head. I mean, we've actually got to get real and stop being mental ourselves, so to speak, on allowing doctors to sign people off on long-term sick because, I don't know, they're anxious or they are depressed. I mean, the cure for all of that is getting out the blimmin' house, meeting people and being productive.
Yeah, I think in the vast majority of cases, so-called mental health issues can be solved without any kind of medical intervention. It's about people pulling their socks up. Look, in some cases that's not true. I think it's wrong, and I know you wouldn't, Alex, I wouldn't, to dismiss, there are people who genuinely are incapable of working because of mental health issues. I would not diminish that. But the absolute spike in this trend in a certain younger generation, younger than me, Alex, younger than you even, and you're a lot younger than me, it is really, really worrying. Liz Kendall has spoken out about this very, very carefully because, of course, it sends most of the Labour Party and the public sector absolutely wild with confected rage. But look, Labour in general are going to have to do something here. We're in a situation where we're spending more on debt service costs, the government is, than we're spending on education, right? Debt service costs are the third biggest line in the government's spending budget. Over 100 billion quid a year we're now spending. Over 10 billion quid a month we're spending on servicing the national debt.
What could we do about that? Is there a way to solve that?
Well, you have, and a lot of the debt, a lot of the extra debt we're taking on is to service the interest on our existing debt. This is a Ponzi scheme. This is a Ponzi scheme now. We have to start having proper conversations, across the political spectrum about reining in the public finances. The best way to get the public finances under control is to grow. If the economy is bigger, you're getting more tax revenue and you're getting more activity at given tax rates. I would lower tax rates. You'll get more tax revenue in, certainly.
Right, the Laffer curve.
Indeed, when it comes to corporation tax. But Labour is ideologically and temperamentally incapable of doing that. But the Tories should be talking about that, screaming it from the rooftops. But of course they won't, because then everyone says austerity, austerity. Yeah, think about these austerity years under the Tories, right, from 2010 to 2018. The national debt, Alex, went up from about 40 or 50% of GDP to 80% of GDP.
Right. So austerity, but not done remotely rightly.
And that was austerity.
Gosh.
It's crazy. So we have to, the state has to be made less profligate. We need to have a state where we are not spending £10 billion a month servicing our debt. We have to start growing. And the way to grow is not to raise taxes. I mean, we've got this 25 billion quid increase in business taxation coming in April, right? National insurance contributions. And just the thought of that means that we're already seeing a slump in hiring. Many young people getting in touch with me saying there are literally no jobs. There were a year ago, but now there aren't.
And also on that, I mean, it hasn't even come in yet, and we've already seen the impact. And what you imagine when it does come in, pubs shutting, social care sector, everything's going to be impacted by it. That's the thing. It sort of hovers as a spectre over anybody who employs anyone, whether public sector or private sector.
It's all very well putting up employer national insurance contributions on people who are employed. But if fewer people are employed, you get less money.
Right.
And just this 25 billion quid, which they say it's going to raise each year, it won't.
Right.
That's 2 months of debt interest payments.
It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. At the same time, we know that inflation is climbing. One assumes when this kicks in and costs have to be passed down through prices to the consumer, that's only going to get worse. Tell us about inflation.
It's already happening, Alex. As well as in my life as a journalist, I sit on boards of organisations and stuff. Boardrooms, corporate leaders, directors are absolutely mindful that this massive increase in the cost of hiring people is coming in. And then on top of that, you've got the Angela Rayner-inspired employment rights bill, which is going to add about 5 billion quid a year. That's an official estimate to employer costs of actually hiring people. This is things like, you can get much more employment rights from day one. So you're going to get a lot of unscrupulous employees gaming that. Of course, that will absolutely whack small, medium-sized enterprises. They're the people who employ 2/3 of people. They're going to hire a lot less people. Inflation, as you say, it's a big story. It's gone up from 2.5% to 3% the year to the end of January. That is a big increase. It's much higher than the Bank of England's 2% target. That means fewer interest rate cuts. I don't think we're going to see another interest rate cut for a long time, actually. Certainly if the Bank of England was looking at the inflation number rather than yielding to pressure from politicians to try and get growth going. And that inflation, doesn't just show the cost of living squeeze is ongoing. Food prices are still 30% higher than they were before in 2020. It also means that the government's going to have to pay yet more to borrow. if there's inflation, investors are going to want more money.
Yeah.
And get into a kind of downward spiral. Look, I don't want to talk about the economy. I'm just pointing out what's obvious to people who actually understand financial markets. It seems like no one in Downing Street does.
But Rachel Reeves was an economist at the Bank of England, Liam. Thank you ever so much. You're a genius. You're brilliant. Liam Halligan, economist. Now, it's interesting, talking about these Angela Rayner workers' rights. Now, there's something else I've seen that's going to be a problem in all of this. So this involves being able to basically set an employment tribunal against your boss from day one, be able to claim long-term sick from day one, getting rid of zero-hours contracts and all the rest of it. Look, I'm a freelancer. I've just come out of having flu. I didn't really earn any money in January. You bill as a freelancer, you have to sort of manage your own sick leave. You've got to make sure you've got rainy day funds. That is life. That's the world I live in. Yahoo sucks to me, but I don't think it should be right if I had sent, an invoice to Talk saying you need to pay me for all these shows I haven't done. I live in the real world. The problem is when you have a system like this, and Liam's saying there will be some people who game the system of our domestic workforce. I tell you what else will happen. Something that's happened a lot in our welfare, and I already know employers who've had this happen to them. So when it comes to our welfare, big Albanian gangs inventing loads and loads of false accounts and then essentially just, using them to claim millions of pounds from the government to build their mansions back in Albania. Absolute ridiculous racket exposing weaknesses in the system. Now, I know somebody who employed somebody from Albania, right? And literally they turned around on day one and left and then said, I'm going to take you to a tribunal because, I think it wasn't day one, it was after a certain period of time. I'm taking you to a tribunal because I'm pregnant and I need somewhere to go and lie down and you didn't provide it. Now, the thing is with doing that, what they said was, right, we can take this to a tribunal or you can pay me £1,000 right now. And the employer looked at him and went, if I have to engage a lawyer, it's going to cost me a lot more than £1,000. So by the way that the system's sorted, they basically go, this is so ridiculous, but I've got no choice. Lawyer, lose load of money or pay the £1,000 now and make them disappear. I have no doubt that if this all becomes weaker, you are going to have, especially a lot of the foreign gangs know how to game our system. They do.
And a lot of people in this country know how to game the system. They're gaming the welfare system at the moment in many cases, and therefore you're going to see this coming in. Employers are going to then spend money on it. This will turn into a profession for some people, and they'll make an awful lot of money out of it. These rules that are coming in, the attack on business, I don't understand. If growth is supposed to be the Chancellor's #1 priority, you don't start attacking businesses by setting the conditions for them not to want to continue to employ the people they've got at the moment because it's costing too much, or to employ more people. You don't get growth that way.
No, it's madness. The whole election campaign was fought on, we're going to bring back growth. Done the opposite. Right, we're going to take a short break now and then it's the final section of the show, so don't go anywhere. I'm back just after this.
Putin's the bad guy here. But again, he has 4,500 nuclear warheads. He is doing, he's the uncontrollable one in this thing. It is a proxy war between the U.S. and Russia. So the fact that we're leaving Zelensky out, who hasn't had an election in quite some time, and we're leaving the Europeans out, who are useless and haven't supported Ukraine, this has to be between the bad guy and the U.S., who are supporting the good guys, if you want to make that argument.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, welcome back. Last bit of the show. We've got bits and bobs to discuss, messages to read, and a call to take. Now, Neil, in Labour-obliterated Wales. Don't worry, you've got Senate elections coming up in next year, isn't it, I think? Wales goes to the polls. Yeah, and I think that's going to be the first time that Labour might finally change its colour. Right. Says, my partner wants her 0 hours contract. As I work full-time and I have to fit my holidays around others, if my partner has to do this, we'll never go on holiday. Hold on, that's what the Starmer the Marxist wants. This is the thing. There are some people, like I'm a freelancer, right? It comes with its disadvantages. It also has its advantages. If they say, can you work da-da-da-da-da, I can say no. If I had something else I wanted to do. And so it does have its advantages, but that means if you're going to be a free agent, you've got to manage your own, you know, here's some cash to one side in case I get a bit sick.
Yep.
It's just called living in a free world. Hi, Alex. I do hope that Liam is a reformer. Would love him to be the Reform Party Chancellor. He would be blimmin' good, wouldn't he?
He'd be very good.
He would be very good. Hi, Alex. Steve from Middlesbrough. On Farage being silent. He may know more than you think. Only fools rush in. Hopefully it's a case of watch this space. I feel like we're all watching the space right now, and that's just the way it's got to go with delicate geopolitical negotiations.
Yeah, I think we need soak time, because there's not enough information to put detailed analysis in it. We need to find out what's going on, and therefore maybe being quiet is the best way forward.
It's dragged on for 3 years, and it's the first time now we've had a complete change of administration in America who want to do things differently. So that's not going to. I mean, Trump is clearly a man with a bee in his bonnet and wanting to get on with getting on, but these things are going to take a little bit more time to unpick. Now, here's a ridiculous story. I mean, the sort of language police of the words you can and can't use. So it comes back again and again and again. And you would just imagine there are some bits of society that are not going to be affected by this. You'd think that when it comes to, I don't know, let's say the Hell's Angels probably aren't going to start being like, well, you can't call us angels. We're going to have to be called, you know, Cupids and angels or archangels, or, you know. You'd expect they wouldn't go along with this. Well, folk dancing, you know, when you have good old Barn and Cayley dances, and you've got the group of the men, and then you've got the women, and the caller who guides participants through the steps going, ladies, now take your partner by the hand and do so. I don't know, I don't really go to Cayley's that often. But apparently folk dancing has to drop terms like ladies and gentlemen to avoid offending minor. I thought you were going to say something about focaccia then, but thankfully you didn't. To avoid offending minority genders. That's according to a leading music organisation, the English Folk Dance and Song Society. I mean, they probably are wokists, aren't they? They probably vote Corbyn and have hairy armpits.
Well, I think you should just ignore it and continue saying ladies and gentlemen. What is this organisation going to do? Nothing. Has it got any power? Probably not. So it's a bunch of people who just like to hear the sound of their own voices.
Well,
not saying ladies and gentlemen, obviously.
But this is the thing, if you're going to get rid of these words, ladies and gentlemen, that's probably half of like the folk catalogue from yesteryear abolished. How many times would the word lady have been used in a song, or woman, or girl, or man, or, you know, something that, you know, describes the genders within a heterosexual framework? I doubt much folk is actually intersectional, quite frankly.
Well, how many people would fall into these minority categories that they're talking about? There's probably, you know, less than a dozen in the whole country that are part of that dancing organisation or dancing group. But you know, but I don't know. But would they be offended? Has anyone actually checked with them? Is this people just making stuff up for the sake of making it up?
Yeah, these people do just make stuff up for the sake of making it up to keep themselves in some sort of non-existent fake news job. Oh my God, here we go. So get this. Oh my days, I love this. Dancers have also been advised to be conscious of dance floor consent. Participants should avoid touching other dancers unnecessarily. Just... how are you going to blimmin' do a dosey Joe if you can't hold hands or link arms?
Well, yeah, and have they, you know, it's been many years since I've been to one of those things called a disco, but, you know, the slow dance at the very end of the night when you were the teenager was the thing that you looked forward to.
I can't wait for the MOBO Awards to come out and sort of ban twerking and grinding. They wouldn't even dare, would they? I mean, it's just, this is the thing. They go after the low-hanging fruit, which is always the sort of, you know, the old school stuff. They don't dare speak a word to anything in the new age, this is now British culture. They just go after the history and heritage.
Exactly. But I think actually what they really wanted to do was just to get on the air and be talked about on the programme here, and we fulfilled their dream for them by doing that.
We have fulfilled their dream for them. Oh, well, I'm sorry. I didn't sort of name who said it. I don't even know. Apparently they're somewhere in Camden. Of course they are. This is always where these people seem to live. You can actually sort of pick a part of the world to live in based upon whether it's sort of, you know, on board or not on board.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm afraid much of London, there aren't many bastions of common sense left in our capital city.
Well, freedom of speech. Let them get on with it, but ignore completely, and let's not give them too big a platform.
Let's read out some messages now. Here we go. Someone's message, I think it's Liam, saying, playing devil's advocate here, what would happen if the UK sided with Putin?
Crikey. If the UK sided with Putin, and... you know, if Trump continues to side with Putin, what that will say to other dictators around the world is actually take what you want and get on with it. And if you're strong enough, we'll come and negotiate with you. So what would happen very quickly after that is Xi Jinping will decide to take Taiwan. As Xi Jinping takes Taiwan, we get instability across the world. The Japanese will turn around and say, actually, we want our Kuril Island back that Russia has occupied since the end of the Second World War. Russia's at its weakest point now, so now's the time for us to take that back. They've already changed the constitution.
And Britain goes, we want the empire back!
Well, exactly. and Kim Jong-un in North Korea will turn around and say, well, everyone's fighting all around here. Now's the time for me to reunify the Korean Peninsula, and we'll drop a small nuclear weapon on Seoul and South Korea. We're then into World War III.
Well, there you go. Anderson Shelters at the ready is what would happen if we sided with Putin. Now let's quickly speak to Stuart, who's in Belfast. Hi, Stuart.
Hi, Alex. How are you?
Yeah, I'm not bad. How are you?
Well, it's funny you just say that. We should play Putin. We need to strong-arm Mr. Putin. It seems to be the only thing he's actually going to understand. Rather than deploying 30, 40, 50,000 troops, whatever ridiculous number that the European Union come up with, put a small monitoring force in there so they can actually look in the eyes of Russia's soldiers if there is any incursions or any breaches of whatever ceasefire deal puts in place, and put Ukraine under protection of our nuclear umbrella. Simple as that. Done. And then say, look, we can't afford to fight back. We can't afford to deploy hundreds of thousands of troops. We'll have to go nuclear if there's any breaches of any ceasefire agreement. Simple as that.
Now, Phil.
It's always really difficult when you've only got one option, because Putin could then call our bluff on it. And with the status of our government at the moment, I don't think the Prime Minister would start a nuclear World War III.
I don't know. His poll ratings are pretty bad. It
would get him out of it. Yes, we need to provide a security guarantee and umbrella for Ukraine. Right. And as part of that, if Ukraine was allowed to join NATO, then it would come under the nuclear umbrella de facto, and the UK's nuclear deterrent is committed to be NATO's deterrent as well. So there is a path for that to happen, but for it to be the only path, I don't think anyone would sign up to that.
Well, there you go, Stuart. Unfortunately, it's a far more... This is a blimmin' problem. It's all far too complex, isn't it, for my liking. It's really hard to know what to do, what strategy to take, what gets us into more trouble, what alleviates the trouble. But what is clear, actually, is nobody's come up with a grand plan, let alone be able to agree on anything. And surely that is what Europe needs to get on with, getting on with first and foremost. And interesting, Sir Keir Starmer is going to be bimbling over to Russia. Russia? Russia? Probably is. No, Washington, D.C. wanting to sort of take the lead on all of this, and you kind of think, oh, you're not really the right character.
He hasn't got the personality, the charisma, and the Trump team will see him as Joe Biden too.
You're always pound shop lookalike Ian Collins. What would you do if you were Keir Starmer?
Yes, right. Yeah, it was a fairly lucrative sideline I had going for a while. Believe me, the currency's really dropped on this fizzog.
Maybe we should send you over to Washington, D.C. pretending to be Starmer.
That's what
I reckon you could do a better job.
I might be able to make it... Well, I think what you've both just said is absolutely right, because, of course, politics isn't... they used to call politics showbiz for ugly people, but actually it's much more than that now. You've got to have that certain... thing. You've got to have the thing, the X factor.
Spine.
He has and spine, and even if you don't believe what you say, you've got to sound as if you believe what you say. All of that stuff. He doesn't have any of that, and those guys in tasty suits on Capitol Hill are going to look at Starmer and think, who is this minion? Who is this character that's come to tell us how to get peace?
We're crying out for leadership in Britain on so many things, which is why we saw what happened in America and the MAGA movement and just went, finally, someone doing stuff, changing things, shaking things up in a way that's in America's interest. Can we have a bit of that? And this is the problem. We don't have any of that in the UK. I can't even really identify many people in Europe who have a bit of that. Meloni, I thought, she's got the right chit-chat, but she's not really doing the stuff, is she?
No,
doing some of it, I think.
Doing some of it.
She's kind of, she's at the heels of that one, I think. But it just, even if somebody, we talked about this the other day, even if you look back at, whether they're left-wing or right-wing, just leaders or politicians that have that certain something where the House goes quiet when they speak, everybody listens to them, they stand on the international stage, even if it's a Galloway character, people who've got that kind of oomph within them. There's very few, if any, now. Who have we got?
In the New World Order, where, Talk Towers becomes the last standing building in the United Kingdom after some sort of nuclear holocaust and we have to run the show. And